schemas and things, taxonomies. Cool. So yeah, a lot of different people, and that's kind of what this day is about, right? Cross-pollinating, here to meet different people. We had a bingo thing going, but it looked like everyone was kind of meeting new people. Did anyone meet anybody new out there? Cool, great. Yeah, that's what this is all about. And you know, just seeing like what we all do and like how we go about tackling this issue of making the world understandable to people. So this is actually the 15th annual World IA Day, which is pretty cool. 15 years, that's a long time, especially in tech. That's like a century. So I don't know, who was around for the birth of the hamburger menu? Anybody? At 6 a.m. hit the States and over in Ohio and New York and Philly, and they're probably going to lunch about now. And then we and Vancouver were rounding it out for the day. I also just wanted to mention that Tehran was scheduled to be on the docket, and obviously they've had to bow out, and we send our love and support to them under these trying times. So I just wanted to kind of, okay, this got moved over a little bit. Just, you know, a little thing that I was doing when I was putting some of this stuff together, information architecture, right, making things meaningful. You know, that list started like that, which was just a comma-separated thing, not very usable, right? Alphabetical order. So put it in a list like this, a little bit easier to parse, right? Then I was like, well, what, you know, alphabetical is great, but like, what about chronologically? So this is chronological. Then I was like, okay, well, how's that relative to us? And then you put the times on it, and then now it's like this list has become something that's sort of meaningful to us in this context. So I just want to share that little example of just like how this type of thing just shows up everywhere. So, and that's what we're here to do, right? That's the World Information Architecture Association. It is a nonprofit. They build and connect a global community of advocates and practitioners of AI, IA. That probably won't be the first time that happens today. So yeah, promoting it in different fields, right? So like we're all in kind of different fields. A lot of us just, you know, bringing that spirit and advocating for that in our particular fields. They do have a lot of resources for learning and professional development, and yeah, and you can, you know, their whole website has a whole host of different things. They have a Discord, which is actually not all that active right now. So if anybody wants to, you know, if they get inspired here, they can go and like maybe do something over there and get content going on over there. So that's World. This is where is it? World Information Architecture. Am I seeming nervous yet? I'm going to slow it down. What next? Okay, so yeah, we're committed to your safety. Obviously, if anybody is harassing you or bugging you, let somebody know. You guys look like a good crowd. Not worried about that. So, sponsors. Obviously, Art Center, where we are in, they are, you know, giving us this space to use for the past couple years. You know, if you are into design, obviously, SoCal's primo art school for decades and decades and decades. I myself went to their high school program for transportation design, and a lot of the stuff around in this building is transportation design. It's really cool, and you're welcome to walk around and look at all this stuff. It's really cool. We got UXL, which is a UX-oriented learning platform. They have a lot of resources as well. You can get certifications. Where's my? Yeah, what else did they got? Oh, they got a mobile app, a job board, certifications, so check them out. They have a free tier. You can kind of check out what they have going on over there. Lucky Boy, that will be our lunch sponsor. They're another Pasadena staple. They have breakfast burritos all day and night, so that's cool. They're open till midnight, which is cool. They actually have 2 locations. One of them is a drive-in, so they're old school. They've been around since 1961, so Pasadena staple. We have Ivy, who is a great photographer, and we will have some of her work showing during lunch, so check that out. And she's actually around here taking pictures. Where's she at? Where'd she go? All right, I guess she's not. She'll be around and taking pictures. That's Ivy. You can say hi if you need like a wedding photographer or anything, you know anybody. Give her a holler. We have Perpetual Education, which is also our very own Derek, who is not here at the moment either. And his platform, Perpetual Education, is really good. He's kind of like full stack design, development, learning. He's actually getting into helping people sell like content, like learning packages. I'm not exactly sure. You can talk to him. He's around here as well. Global sponsors, so these are the people that are sponsoring just the association on the global scale. There's a lot of them. I'm not exactly sure what everyone does, but at the end, and I think on your sheets that you got there, some of these places are doing raffles and discounts, so you can check that out on the website. All right, so I think we'll get started then with our first speaker, Mr. Richard Obregon.
No, it's okay. Awesome. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Good. Good. On the morning of Saturday, January 13th, 2018, the people of Hawaii woke up to a nightmare. At exactly 8:07 a.m., phones across the islands buzzed with a synchronized, piercing alarm. The text message read, in all caps, "Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill." For 38 minutes, an entire state believed the world was ending. Parents desperately pushed their children into storm drains. Drivers abandoned their cars in the middle of the highway to seek shelter in tunnels. People called their loved ones to say their final goodbyes. But there was no missile. There was no threat. When the dust settled, the world demanded answers. We expected to find a sophisticated cyber attack, a rogue AI, or a catastrophic hardware meltdown. Instead, the investigation revealed something far more terrifying in its simplicity. They found a drop-down menu. The warning officer in charge of the emergency system had been running a routine drill. On his computer screen, he was presented with a list of links. The link to run a simulation was labeled Test Missile Alert. Right next to it, virtually indistinguishable in the heat of the moment, was the link labeled Missile Alert. He clicked the wrong one. That 38 minutes of sheer terror was not caused by a glitch. It was caused by a failure of organization. It was a failure of labeling, of structure, of anticipating how a human being would interact with a system under pressure. It was a catastrophic failure of information architecture. And here's another one. When we hear the phrase information architecture, it sounds highly technical. It sounds like something strictly reserved for computer scientists or for software engineers. But the truth is, organizing information is not a modern invention. It's a fundamental human instinct. It's how we survive. Evolutionary psychology tells us that the human brain evolved to categorize the world. If our ancient ancestors couldn't quickly sort out a rustling of a bush into the category of wind or the category of predator, they didn't survive. We learn to sort objects into categories before we even learn to speak. Think about the origins of science. Long before we had genetics, we had taxonomy. We survived by naming plants, grouping them into families based on their shared characteristics, so that we could instantly know what would nourish us and what would kill us. We've been doing this forever. We sort rocks. We organize our spices. We decide what goes in the top drawer or what gets relegated to the bottom drawer. We instinctively categorize, label, and group our environment to reduce our cognitive load. We structure the world so that we don't have to rethink our reality every single morning. This deeply human instinct to organize shows up everywhere in our everyday lives. Think about your computer desktop right now. Some of you, not me, have perfectly nested file folders, separated by year, project, and client. Others, like me, have a desktop covered in 200 files named document underscore final underscore v4 underscore really final.pdf. Think about the grocery store. The supermarket is a masterpiece of invisible architecture. You know instinctively that the milk is in the bag. You know that candy is at the checkout. You know how to navigate 40,000 unique items without a map. Why? Because the store matches your mental model. Consider the airport. You arrive in a foreign country where you don't speak a word of the language, yet you can flawlessly navigate from your arrival gate to the baggage claim to the taxi stand. How? Because of brilliant wayfinding. Decades ago, designers pioneered concepts like the Schiphol standard at Amsterdam's airport, stripping away non-essential information, using strict color coding, and giving you exactly the information you need, exactly when you need it. Or think about sitting down at a restaurant. The menu is structured: appetizers, mains, sides, desserts. If you opened a menu and the ice cream was between the steak and the mashed potatoes, you would literally feel a physical sense of discomfort. Most people, they don't notice this stuff. Information architecture is the silent infrastructure of our lives. You only notice it when it's wrong. And when it's wrong, chaos fills the gap. We've all experienced the frustration of bad architecture. It's the government website where you just want to renew your license, but you have to navigate through endless, redundant PDFs that ask for the same information 3 times. It's the hospital signage that gets completely lost. You're already stressed, you're looking for the cardiology department, and instead, the hospital has decided to be creative and renamed it the Purple Bear Zone. You're wandering the halls, anxious, because the design prioritized a cute concept over human clarity. It's the digital equivalent of a Norman door. Have you ever walked up to a door, grabbed a handle that seemed clearly like it should be pulled, and yanked on it, only to smack right into the glass because a tiny sign said push? That is a Norman door. An object that sends you the wrong signal. The internet is full of Norman doors. It's full of websites where you can't find the one thing that you came for because the navigation was designed around the company's internal politics rather than the customer's actual needs. When there is no one actively thinking about structure, the system defaults to chaos. So, whose job is it to stop the chaos? Sometimes this job is explicit. We have librarians who use complex systems to ensure that millions of books can be retrieved by anyone. We have taxonomists who classify massive data sets. We have information architects who map out the exact flows and structures of our favorite digital products. But more often than not, this work is entirely invisible. A lot of people are doing information architecture work without knowing that it actually has a name. It's the office manager who decides exactly how the department's shared Google Drive is organized so that new hires can actually find their onboarding documents. It's the nurse who redesigns the patient intake form so that the most critical medical allergies are always at the very top. It's the small business owner creating a navigation bar for their very first website. Anytime that you're arranging the parts of something to make it understandable to someone else, you're practicing information architecture. But as things get bigger, our accidental architecture stops working. Organizing your personal bookshelf is easy. Organizing the Library of Congress requires a system. The more complex the content, the more intentional that the structure has to be. This is where information architecture gets formal. We move beyond simple folders and start building design systems. We develop content strategy. We engineer search and navigation architectures that can handle millions of queries. We build controlled vocabularies and massive taxonomies. We have to formally define what these things are, what we call an ontology, and how to relate to each other. Because if we don't define the rules of our information environment precisely, the systems that we build on top of them will collapse. And this brings us to the frontier. We are living through a massive technological shift with the rise of artificial intelligence and large language models, or LLMs, like ChatGPT. When you ask an AI a complex question and it instantly generates a flawless, human-sounding response, it feels like magic. It feels like the machine is thinking, but it's not magic. It's information architecture at an unprecedented scale. The entire foundation of an LLM is built on its structure. It is built on two core concepts: tokens and embeddings. First, the AI breaks down human language into tokens. Think of these as the fundamental building blocks, the individual puzzle pieces of words and subwords. But how does it know what those tokens actually mean? There, it uses embeddings. Embeddings are basically a massive multidimensional map of meaning. In this map, concepts that are similar are grouped together. The embedding for the word king is located very close to the word queen, but it's located very far away from the word dishwasher. This is how the machine learns semantic relationships. It's creating a mathematical representation of our language based entirely on how concepts are grouped, categorized, and related to one another. In other words, embedding is just a digital taxonomy. If the data we feed these models is chaotic, biased, or poorly labeled, the AI's map of meaning will be warped. It will hallucinate. The intelligence underneath generative AI is fundamentally organization. To interact with AI, to train with it, to build with it, we have to understand how information is structured. From sorting rocks in the dirt, to navigating an airport, to the complex vector databases powering artificial intelligence, the journey is the same. We're just trying to make sense of the mess. We're giving the world a structure so that we can navigate it safely and effectively. Today, we're laying down the shared language and the foundational frame for this incredible discipline. By understanding the roots of how we organize, you will be prepared for the deep dives to come. When Justina takes the stage later today to talk to you about the power of slowing down in your design process, when John walks you through the intricate mechanics of naming systems, and when Wesley shows you how to build taxonomy and massive collections, they are building on this exact same foundation. They're giving you the tools to stop the chaos. We're no longer just building websites or apps. We are the architects of human understanding. Let's build it right. Thank you.
All right. Hello. Check, check, check. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any questions before he sits down? Any questions, comments, discussions? Forgot to mention, we're doing kind of a collaborative sort of prompting regarding the speeches. So if you want to take part in that, they're over here with your post-it notes. Okay. No questions or? Yeah.
Like, what do I think are like general tips for information architecture? Yeah, so, I mean, to me, it's like the most
What was the
important
question?
concept. The question, as I understand it, is like, what is a general approach to information architecture? Like what would be like cool guidelines? So to me, within that and answering that, like, information architecture exists everywhere, right? Like, so this laptop right here, I've never used this laptop before. It's an Apple MacBook. I don't know what model it is, but I navigated it through this PowerPoint presentation, right? I utilize that because of information architecture, because that laptop is built a specific way. It's built by Apple, utilizing systems, utilizing PowerPoint. I know that if I go to the top left-hand side and I click, I can do things within that, et cetera. Those types of like UI frameworks that can be universally applicable are like the key. To me, like the best way to look at it is if you didn't speak a language, how would you communicate it to someone? And that's the best way to look at it.
Do you think it would be in cultural context for the architecture?
1,000,000% cultural context matters significantly, and if you ignore cultural context in anything, we see that all throughout AI now especially, that's the downfall of everything. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. Like cultural context is significant all throughout anything that you would do within this planning. So, actually, yeah, I think that's an amazing question, right? So to me, like the lines between the ethics of these things are blurring more and more. Like, and I can't understate that enough. I don't know the answers to that question. Like, I don't know what's ethical or what's not. Right? When someone comes to me and asks me to train a AI model and put ethics into it, I don't know what ethics to put into it. I put into it utilitarianism and natural ethics. If you don't like that, tell me that you don't like that, right? That's the most universal ethical platform that I can think of. But that's what I can think of. And then I'm just one person, right? This affects every single person in this room. And then so my opinion on it isn't as important as everyone's opinion on it.
So one of the examples you have is the grocery store layout, right? The reason why we understand grocery stores in part is because we grew up going to the grocery store, but also there was probably a series of different ways that stores utilize their layout, manipulated the layout. So maybe even a series of mistakes they made where they said, oh, nobody is getting this, right? And some things that are more technical in nature, such as like it's easier to put things that are cold on the outside where there's actually the infrastructure, even though Jimmy put stuff in the wall. But the whole point being is like mistakes were made. Somebody had to go, oh yeah, that was a mistake, and then make the correction. The way we created these chatbots and we utilize large language models, mistakes are not obvious, and mistakes get made a lot. So whose job is it to point out the mistake?
That's anytime that I ever consult with a company around this, it's been my position on this, and it's been a part of information architecture since the 60s and 70s, which is that you shouldn't rely on a computer to make decisions, right? A computer cannot make management decisions because a computer can't be held accountable. No matter what you do, you can't put that computer as the accountable person when something goes wrong. And if it's not 100%, something is going to go wrong. Even if it's 0.001%, someone has to be accountable for that, and it can't be the computer. So who is it? And in our current world, that's a big question. There's a lot of that, and, and there's no accountability. Awesome. Yeah. So to me, like within that question, like every single time that I talk to a business about AI, I face that question because they come to me and they're like, I want AI in our company. That's the general approach that I like. Whenever I'm talking with a business, like our competitor, our neighbor is using AI. I don't know what they're doing. Like all of a sudden they have like 1,000 ads, and I just want that. And then that's like how it goes, right? And it's like, okay, well, AI is goal-oriented up front. What is your goal in this up front? Like, matching your neighbor isn't a goal. And then so within that, we start and we piece together, they have no internal structure for their organization. And so it's like, okay, we need to start there. AI is your secondary problem. Like, you have to figure out what your goal is and then move forward from that. And then I've been in situations where they didn't do that, and then they pull me in, and that's a complete failure of labeling of information, right? Their AI doesn't work. It doesn't do anything that they wanted to do. It's not predicting how they want it to do because they didn't set the goals up front. I can. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I could talk about RAG for a long time, but probably the most pertinent thing to say around it is what my company very specifically, I deal with like geometry and AI as opposed to algebra, and then so within that, my approach is to deal with the geometric representations and shapes of data as opposed to the actual representational, actual data itself. So I compete with RAG on that level, but RAG RAG has its benefits and its minuses, right? Like RAG doesn't actually update the internal weights of the system. It doesn't actually there's latent space interactions, things like that it doesn't account for. And AI, the way that LM models work, it's not that linear progression. Like I understand why people love RAG and graph tuning and things like that because it's the way that the human mind works, but that's not the way that the AI mind works. Yeah, to me, they always go hand in hand, right? I think the most broad thing that I can say around that topic, people always and often think that politicians when they make these bills that they're stupid, right? That they don't know anything. Take a look at a HIPAA bill, for example. If you look through the HIPAA statutes, the way that HIPAA is written as a giant middle finger to me, flat out. It's someone like me that knows exactly what to go through. They carved it out perfect, beyond perfect. It's the perfect shape as to block me out, right? So someone stupid couldn't do that. It has to be informed within that. And then those processes, those systematic processes, et cetera, all of that goes into the shaping of these bills, all of the politics, et cetera. The fact that people think that it doesn't is to me more show. It 100% does on that level, and every single person within it knows that that is the structure, and you can see it from their outputs. So, to me, like the way that those things are countered is like experts. This is my opinion on this. Like experts in different areas need to take stronger stands when it comes on these things, right? Like AI is a good leveler of the playing field, but like AI will never replace an expert in an individual subject. Like the baseline of AI for any output is the norm, right? The median output. And then if you get an expert in there and you start interrogating it, then all of a sudden that median output goes up to match the expert. And then so you need that expert to do that, to interrogate that, to get that underneath layer. But if you don't do that, then you get what we have now, which is a very bad situation. For sure. So to me, this is just my personal answer to that, and it's my philosophy, which is like, and it has never served me wrong, is that all of this, whether it's computers, AI, et cetera, it all boils down to physics, right? A lot of people say that it's a black box process. We can't understand how these things work, et cetera. They all work via physics. The AI model and the latent space of an AI model can't create physics that doesn't exist within our universe. Like if it does something that in its latent space, that has to follow the laws of physics of our universe. Like it's literally mathematically impossible, right? And then so within that, if you understand that and you understand the structure of those things, AI starts to make a lot more sense. AI is a thermodynamic process, and then a lot of what you understand about like temperature related to AI, if you're familiar with like temperature, things like that, that's because it's a thermodynamic process, right? It's borrowed directly from thermodynamics, from physics, in those aspects and in those areas. And then so if you want to understand AI better, understand physics better, and you'll understand all of it like really fast is the best way I can put that overall, if you want one direction.
Is that it? Okie doke. Thank you, Richard. Alrighty. Thank you, Richard. And yeah, physics. It's all physics. All right, well, we're running a little ahead of schedule. So does anybody need to take a break, or should we just keep it rolling? Alrighty then, we'll keep it rolling. Let's see here. So next up, we have John Lee. There he is. And I will hand it over to him.
Hello. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. Louder. Okay, I'll do my best. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks to Derek and Corey and all the coordinators and volunteers for putting together this great event. Also, Richard for opening us up. It's really kind of setting the stage for IA. And I think a lot of what Richard was talking about will go a little more into the weeds in this talk, specifically around design systems and naming. And to lay that out, we'll be talking about design systems and naming within design systems. We'll also be talking about how that is represented in code, so HTML, CSS, and more, and hopefully share some methodologies and best practices around that I've gathered over the years. And then finally, why does that all matter? And tie that all back to this year's theme, World IAD theme of designing for meaning. But first, just a little bit about me. My name is John Lee, and I'm a designer and co-founder of Elio. We're a web design and development studio based here in Pasadena. Before starting Elio, I spent about a decade in New York City working as a product manager and eventually leading product teams. And in those roles, I worked really closely with design teams, engineering teams, and being kind of in the fast-paced startup environment, found yourself wearing a lot of hats. So I was an individual contributor. I was deep in Figma, creating mock-ups, wireframes, etc. But also found myself in code, in the code base, and gaining that skill set over the years. Also, before that, I have a background and I studied architecture, and I think that's shaped a lot of how I approach design and development, and also my appreciation for design systems, which we'll get into today. Kind of on I guess one way to put that is we like to combine all those elements to when we founded Elio, which is a passion for craft, the desire to create really playful and tactile designs, the systems-oriented mindset that we have, and also a way to work with some awesome clients and put some really creative projects out into the world. On the personal side, I really enjoy spending time and traveling with my wife and 2 big dogs you can see on screen there. I've been a lifelong kind of tinkerer, builder, crafter. One of my first jobs out of college was at a architectural modeling and fabrication shop, and you can see a couple examples there. And that's kind of a skill set and a hobby that stuck with me, and just love building things. And I think that, again, informs my work. But with that, let's go ahead and get into it. Corey already kind of did a survey of the audience. I saw a lot of UX researchers. But just another quick raise of hands. Ooh, designers in the audience? Amazing. How about developers, engineers? Great, awesome. And then finally, who here has worked with design systems or has a familiarity with design systems? Oh, amazing. In that case, I'll just shut it down and head out now. But so what's the question? What is a design system? And at a high level, a design system is a shared set of components, guidelines, and standards. It's a single source of truth for designers and developers. And we're going to walk through some examples today to talk about what that means. But first, what's kind of the problem? Imagine that these 6 buttons are 6 instances of the same button across a website or an app. If we assume that the top left is kind of the standard and what we want, it's brand appropriate, we can already see the issue here, which is that they're not all the same button, right? Edges are sharper, the font's off, the blue is off, sizing is wrong. And while these are, kind of a minor example, these are the type of inconsistencies that can compound really quickly, right? It can degrade professionalism and polish. It can muddle a company's brand. It can hurt accessibility. And of course, it can cause confusion because when things look different, users will assume that they mean something different. And so this is the type of problem that design systems were built to solve. Going through a couple examples here, this is Carbon Design System by IBM. And I've just pulled a couple screenshots from each of their websites, but on the left here, we can see color palette or color anatomy. You have the IBM brand blue up top, tints and shades. You have a neutral gray palette as well, to use across the UX for text and borders, things like that. And also some alert colors or notification colors for feedback messages, right? On the right, we have some examples of a button component. Or multiple button components, right? This gives us annotations, guidelines, documentation. What should it look like? What color should it be? What's the spacing around the text or the icons? Should it only be used on white or dark backgrounds, et cetera, right? So really specific component, in this case a button, guidelines and documentation. Another example, which you're probably familiar with, is Material Design. This is the third version by Google. And I'd say that this is probably the most influential and well-regarded design system in the industry. And that's because it's really well documented. It's, if you go to the website, it's really great. So I encourage you to check that out. As well as there's a lot of tooling built around it. As you imagine, not only Google uses this within YouTube, Gmail, Google Drive, etc. You have countless Android apps that are built using Material. Once again, on the left here, you have some different components like buttons and toolbars, progress bars, things like that. But also highlight on the right, you have accessibility best practices. You have do's and don'ts. And so that's to say that design systems are more than just like UI components and how to use them. It's foundational guidelines on rules, boundaries. What should we do and what should we not do? And that goes back to some of Richard's talk where how can we clarify things. Another point I'd like to make is that not all design systems are trying to solve the same problem. On the list in the right side here, we have some goals of a design system, and I'd say a lot of these are common or shared goals. I think everybody universally wants design and experience consistency. It can give you faster iteration and development, reduce errors. If you're going through a rebrand or refactor, if you have a well-designed design system in place, it can make that a lot easier. But then a few at the bottom here, maybe it's not the same for every company or team or product. Drive external adoption. If I go back to the Material example, once again, you have countless Android apps that are using Material, and Google wants that because you have Android developers building using a easy-to-use design system with tooling and components out of the box. That in turn drives more apps to be built on Material, which makes them look and feel better, gives you kind of a cohesive experience. And then finally, that kind of just reflects on Android as an ecosystem overall, right? And it gives you kind of a market advantage or a market benefit. And so that's a very different design constraint than somebody who's building an internal design system for their own product or app, right? Because now you're thinking about how do we enable customization and themability and expression. And so those are kind of the points on the bottom, but one good thing to highlight there. We've just really scratched the surface, and I want to put on screen a lot of different aspects of a design system, and I don't think this captures everything. We certainly don't have time to go into all of these, unfortunately, but I think a couple to call out: components. We talked about buttons, inputs, navigation menus, you name it, forms, etc. Different aspects like accessibility, foundational guidelines, like we talked about. Make sure contrast is good. Don't put navigation in a weird spot that a user might not be able to identify what it is. Things like that. Content and voice guidelines. So, what is our tone as a company? Is it professional? Is it casual and friendly? Is it warm? Things like that. Tooling we talked about. One I'll also highlight here is governance, and ultra important because even if you build a design system, who is responsible for maintaining it? What's the process for adjusting it or adding to it down the line? If a developer finds that, oh, we need this component in the design system, it's not there, what does that process look like? And things like how do we drive adoption internally? Because people, if they're not using it before, there's the inertia and they don't really, it's another thing to learn, right? So how do we drive that adoption? So governance is ultra important, but today what we're going to be focusing on are these top two elements, which are design tokens and components. So, of course, that begs the question, what is a design token? Design tokens are named variables that store fundamental design values. So they're meant to replace hard-coded values. They can be shared across platforms and tools. So think about like a brand book. And if you work in Figma, you have variables and tokens in there. And of course, you have the code base. So how does it all translate to? And we're going to kind of touch on a lot of these today. Examples on the right side at the top, you have a red color, like you have a raw hex value there. Maybe we assign that to red 50. A font like Helvetica, assign that to font family sans. And this is a way to make it more portable. So it's not kind of just this thing in space that you don't understand what it means. And a few more examples down the list. Here we're going to talk about, that there's different layers to design tokens and start to get into the naming and meaning. I think there's a lot of different ways that the industry describes these layers, but in general, I think everyone agrees that there are different kind of categories of these, and there's kind of a funnel, which we'll talk about. So at the very top here, primitive design tokens. These are, they can live kind of in a vacuum and independently. Again, you're assigning red to red 50. Here's a font. We don't know what that is. Next down the list, we have semantic, or you might call them like alias design tokens. And this is where we start to bring in meaning and assign that. So let's say my brand's primary color is that red 50. So now we assign red 50 to color primary. And that's more meaningful to me because in my app or in the code, when we need to employ the brand's primary color, we can now use this design token without thinking about red 50 or even thinking about the hex value. And next down the list, we have composite design tokens or grouped or something like that. If you're familiar with Figma, they have styles, and this you can kind of think about this as styles. Essentially, it's just a group of properties that all kind of filter into one token. It can be another token, it could be another variable, but if you think about text, for instance, there's a lot of different properties that go into it. You have the font family, you have the size, font weight, letter spacing, line height, all that stuff can build a composite token here. And at the bottom, we have components. These are not actually design tokens, but I think it helps tell the story because you see how design tokens kind of funnel down into a component. A component, which is like a button that we're talking about, it consumes those tokens, whether it's semantic, composite, whatever they might be, to inform and define what it looks like. So a button has its text, the color of the button, the border radius, other states, things like that. And that, of course, defines the component. And you can see essentially that there's these relationships and links that are being built, and that's what makes design systems maintainable and powerful at scale, which we love. One other thing I'll note, it's pretty obvious from the chart, but going from top to bottom, what you have is least specific at the top, where there are no dependencies or very few dependencies. Again, they can live independently. And as you move toward the bottom, you start to have a lot of dependencies. So they rely on the tokens above them. And again, those are the relationships and links that we were talking about. So if we go back to our Janky button example, on the left here, we have the before, let's say these are two different dialogues or modals within an app, and the continue button. These are supposed to be the same button, but they have, different fonts or different boldness there in the text. And then after we employ our wonderful design system on the right side, we have, kind of a unified, consistent button there. And I can see you raising a round of applause for me already. Congratulations, we did it. Huge difference. But of course, at scale, this is much more powerful. What if there are thousands of buttons across a complex website or app? And then, of course, even more powerful if you have like an entire UI system built around this, and it's not just a button, but it's other inputs. It's hover, tooltips, it's cards, things like that. In this example, let's say we have a company and they're rebranding, and their primary brand color is going from like a blue to a teal, and rather than having to manually go through the entire code base or brand design documents and all that and having to replace that, we can reassign the color teal 60 to the color primary here, and that cascades nicely through, flows through, and it goes back to how we're talking about rebrands, and refactor can be a lot simpler and easier. This is obviously a simple example. In a normal rebrand, you're going to have a lot more to do than this, but hopefully in a design system, you've defined those relationships throughout the app or the website. And so you're able to do this without friction throughout the app. So I want to talk about how this translates to code a little bit. And if we think about components, again, like the button or the nav bar, they're made up of a few things. So you have HTML, which is your structural markup that defines, that lays out the structure of this component on a page. You have CSS, which styles the component. It defines color, font, border radius, things like that. You have JS or JavaScript that can give your button interactivity, give it logic, behavior. We have states and variants. So is this an active button? Is it disabled for some reason? And variants, like is this a submit form button, or is this a delete my account button? So you might have those different types of variants. And this is a simplified code example here. It's actually 2 examples. So if we look at the very top of the screen, we have a blue button there. Both left and right are different approaches to get to that same button. We're going to walk through these examples. Let's start with the left. So at the top, you have HTML, again, which I mentioned was kind of the markup, lays out the structure, tells us that this is a button. And we have in light blue a number of class names here. For those who are engineers, you might recognize this as Tailwind code. And you can see that essentially these are utility class names that each define some visual property of the button. So BG blue might say it's a background blue color. Text white, the text is white. PX and PY are padding in the X and Y directions. It's medium rounded and has a semi-bold font. So as you walk through this, you can kind of understand what this button looks like. And then down in the CSS below, which is the styling, it's tied to each of these utility classes with the specific color and border radius, etc. On the right side, we can see that the class name is just BTN primary, button primary. And all of the kind of visual attributes of this button are handled in the CSS down below. And you can still see background, color, padding, etc. Me personally, I greatly prefer the right approach. And that's because when I look at the markup, the HTML, button primary conveys a lot more meaning to me. It tells me something. And it tells me that this is the primary button, whereas the left side, it tells me what this looks like, but unless I was familiar with the company's buttons and brand, I might not understand that this is like a primary button. This could be any type of blue button. And also, if you look at the CSS on the right side, I think it's a lot more suitable using variables and tokens and it works with that relationship that we were talking about earlier in that big funnel via CSS. And you're fighting against less here, so there's less friction in the process. And I know tons of companies use Tailwind today, and I think we had the question about vibe coding websites, and AI is great at Tailwind. It spits out tons of Tailwind, and I think that's bad. And I think Richard had a great example of have to lean on experts to as you raise the interrogate that and you raise the level of meaning and how you're writing these classes, AI will also learn from that. But to get back to this, a lot of engineers are going to mostly be looking at the markup because you're defining how it looks probably once, ideally. You don't want to keep changing how a button looks every single time you are working in the code. So you define that, but you might be placing a button multiple times. You might be creating a new component within an app. You might be defining a new kind of layout or feature. And rather than copying and pasting this or using a button component that has this in it, you're just using button primary, which again conveys a lot more meaning. So it's a pretty opinionated take. I know a lot of great companies will use Tailwind for good reason, which is it's easy to use, it's widely documented, it's quick for development, it's more consistent, which I think is questionable because there's what if you forget one of these utility classes when you're copying and pasting. And to summarize, this is a very opinionated quote by me, which is just class name should tell you what something is, and your CSS should tell you what it looks like. And I think I have a strong argument for there should be a separation of concerns when you're thinking about, again, your markup and your styling. And the reason for that is, the web has become really, really awesome, right? The things that we can, build and design and show on the internet is really incredible today, right? When, in the early days of the internet, everything was done in HTML, right? All of the uh, the visual attributes was baked directly into the markup. And you might have heading 1 or H1 here as a title. You might have a subtitle that's an H2 and H3, so on and so forth. And it was pretty simple, right? And there might be some default font sizes and weights for each of those tags or elements. But fast forward to today, you might have a website or an app that has two very different contexts where an H1 looks very different, right? And so that's the example here, a couple mock examples. On the left, maybe the home page or a landing page, and on the right, a privacy policy page. What we want to do is keep that sequential H1, H2, H3 hierarchy because that's best practice for screen readers, accessibility tools, and just general code legibility. And you typically don't want to jump from an H2 to an H5. And so we do want to maintain that, but we also want to preserve the visual expression or the characteristics that we can show here with the big hero text, or we probably don't want that for the privacy policy page. So what we could do is give, for example, on the left here, a class name of text heading hero, and on the right side, text heading policy, and style them appropriately within the CSS in a nice structured way, maybe feeding in our design tokens, and keep things nice and organized. My general approach and for naming convention is this convention of category-kind-descriptor. Just a couple examples here. On the left, this is, let's say it's like a team bio card that you might see in a about section. This is a card. It's a team kind, and it's a vertical version or descriptor here. You might have a horizontal version if you have a wider layout or something like that. In the center and on the right are a couple examples of different buttons from an app we're working on called Rechroma. And in that app, there are a lot of different buttons. It's it's like a workspace and a tool. So it was pretty important to us that we came up with names with meaning, and that helped us organize and keep this all easy to navigate. So in the center here, you have button-nav. These are navigation buttons. And on the right, you have button, action, tall, kind of descriptor. And I know what you're thinking, which is the middle one doesn't have a descriptor, right? So you might, you're missing a segment. Or in examples that aren't shown here, you might have a 2-word segment, and that can have 4 segments total, and it's kind of confusing. And I'll be the first to admit that this is a system that has trade-offs and compromises, but there's a lot of experience and reasons why we arrived here, which I'm happy to talk about after the talk if you want to get into that nerdy stuff. But that said, there's plenty of naming conventions and systems and styles out there. One I'll call out is second from the top, BEM, or block element modifier. It's widely used and really well documented. You can see you kind of have the block and then double underscore element and then double hyphen or double dash modifier. And you might ask, why don't I use that? And honestly, it's the annoyance of typing 2 underscores and 2 hyphens. And it might be a silly reason, but if you're in the code and you work with this, you can kind of feel that. Another reason it's more technical is that in the official BEM guidance, it suggests that a pattern of stacking class names within one element, which I don't really like. I kind of like a one-to-one, but anyways, that's all to say that depending on your team, your tech stack, your company, whatever it might be, there's probably some convention out there that work really well for you, and so I encourage you to take a look. One of my favorite quotes here on the left is by Phil Carlton. There are only 2 hard things in computer science, which is cache invalidation and naming things. And I think a lot of folks can relate to this because they've experienced the pain firsthand of either or both. We'll go ahead and skip over cache invalidation. That's another talk, probably better served by somebody else. And then, but naming things, if you think about it, you need to know what a thing is to name it. You need to know what it's not. You need to know the system that it lives within. You also have to understand kind of counterexamples or context, all of these things. And on top of that, you also probably have to be creative, right? Whether you have a lot of metaphors stored in your memory bank or you're within a certain domain that you can kind of pull from. So with the recognition that naming is really, really hard, I think it's also really important that we name it like we mean it. Because ultimately, someone is going to read what you write. And that could be a developer that you hand off the design to. It could be a client's developer after the project is delivered. It could be yourself 6 months from now trying to remember what the heck you wrote. It could also be an AI tool that's parsing the code base and hopefully training off of it and learning better practices in terms of naming and not spitting out tailwind eventually. But another thing to add there is that it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Naming does not happen in a vacuum. It is something that doesn't have a single right answer. It's really context dependent. So let's think about quickly the bio card that we had up on screen on the left there, the team card. Let's say we had a team card, but it was in the context of an app that's all about playing cards or trading cards, right? If you're working on that design system, you probably need to think really long and hard about what you're going to call each of these components to avoid confusion, because now you suddenly have a lot of different types of cards within your app. It also depends on team and code base. So if you're working at a company that has an established way of doing things, they already have a naming system. They are working within with certain tools that require certain types of naming. I don't think it's feasible maybe for to just do a wholesale renaming of everything always, and so it's highly dependent on that. Another thing to point out is that refactoring is not failure, because you might or your team might have done an amazing job doing design, naming, structuring the first time around, but there are of course external variables and forces that can kind of shift our model. So like Figma is always adding new features, right? The web and standards are always updating constantly. And these are strong forces that can shift the model and drive us to ask, is there a better way to be doing this, right? Is there a more efficient way that we can be applying these tools and maybe even adjusting our naming conventions and design tokens to fit that better? So ultimately, the most important thing is that we make deliberate choices and we commit to them consistently. And so we'll wrap it up with, why does this all matter? And that's because the naming decisions that we make in a design system, they become a shared language. I think Richard touched on it earlier, but having a shared language, the developers use it to build, use your names to build. Designers and developers use it to work together. Your business and product teams, they use it to communicate with each other and with stakeholders. Your users can feel the consistency that their names create, whether they realize it or not. And I think one thing that we heard earlier was that when names are good, that they kind of disappear and fade into the background. And when they're not so great, they stick out like a sore thumb and they're everywhere you turn, right? And so I think with that, I'll just say we should do our best to really be intentional with it, to think carefully, to mean it, and do our best to put some better names out into the world. Thanks. Any questions?
Thanks, John. Yeah. Do we have any questions? I'm going to get you on the mic this time so that it shows up on the recording. Anyone? Oh.
Yeah, thanks, John. I know how hard it is building a design system, having done it a few times. So you touched a little bit on accessibility twice in your presentation. I just wonder where you think, like when and where accessibility really matters the most in terms of building or maintaining a design system.
Yeah, it's a great question. Where it matters the most. Things that come to mind quickly, color palette, and like if you think about material, you have surface color and on-surface color, and you have tooling that, compares like the WCAG, does it pass or fail that? While it's not perfect, I think it's APCA or ACPA, one of those, which is a better kind of perceptual color contrast system. But I think color, just for a visual accessibility aspect, that's really important. But also, if we think about the example from material again, where it's the do's and don'ts, that was actually just how should you convey the message. This shouldn't be like, it should be pretty like deterministic. Like what this button is going to do for you. It's like instead of just saying continue, maybe it says submit form. And so that's like really clear. So I think there's a lot there. I will admit that I'm not an accessibility expert, but I think the kind of table stakes is making things easy to see, easy to read, and organized. I think design systems can really help by giving you a system that's tested, across your app, across a lot of different users, and if you receive feedback that is hard to use, then when you fix it in that space, it fixes in a lot of other areas through those relationships.
Just to tack onto that, when you go to say, I don't know, a card or some sort of article, these common user layouts that we have, and then at the bottom it says read more.
Yeah.
But you might not know what read more is at that point because you've jumped and tabbed through all of these different things. So some of the design system has to count in the things that are not visual. Like you might put read more and then a hidden div or something that says the actual name of the article. So you can say, oh, okay, I've kind of been deciding if I want to read this article, and then it reminds you what that is. Or in other cases, if you are searching, you might have ARIA Live might read to you a little bit of some of the things as they're popping up. And those aren't always things that are in like the visual side of the design system. So, oftentimes you have to create a kind of interactive design system that you can use and test and things like that, and that end up in sort of like a live style guide type of situation. Yeah, but I was going to ask you, what is your least favorite design component? If you already answered, I was in the other room, but what's the one that just gives you the most trouble that you're always like, oh, this component is so annoying?
Probably like expandable tables or tables. They suck. I think it's because they are kind of catch-alls for kind of displaying data, and so and they can have a indeterminate number of columns and rows. There's pagination involved. I think these are like really complex things that, it's hard to reuse across even one app. So yeah, one of my least favorite things for sure.
I believe I have like 2 parts, and
Sure.
I think in terms of the accessibility to our friend over here too, it's kind of weird because I watched a video from AxCon. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an accessibility platform, and the one video that I watched was about annotations internationally in regards to accessibility, right? And like it kind of speaks to your point of like this push and pull of uniformity of like components and coding. And my question to you is, how do you think AI can benefit in like uniforming this? Because I know for me, like I'm not a strong coder. I usually use it for research, and I like rely on AI to like help me sometimes find code that like I can help solve for this specific situation.
Yeah, that's a good question. This is less to do specifically with design systems, but something I've done is to use an AI tool to do like a accessibility audit. I think there's a lot of other tools that we use. You go into the browser, but it's just like a quick first pass on telling me what ARIA tags am I missing. Do I have any like tab traps? Does everything have alt attributes and images? And I think to Derek's point, does the read more link kind of give me a preview of what this content's going to be? So I think AI can help you identify those kind of like really kind of first pass. In terms of a design system, I can't say I personally used AI to build in accessibility there. I think it's pretty complex. Maybe it could do a better job these days. But what you mentioned in terms of kind of making things uniform, it brought to mind RTL, which is depending on like a cultural or global context, instead of reading left to right like we do a lot of here in the Western role, you might have right to left, and having a tool that can help automate that process or to do a first pass and then you can review it afterwards. Yeah, that might be an example of something that you could use AI for.
So maybe kind of a meta question, but when it comes to like developing a design system as a team, what is like the sort of like information architecture of that? Like in terms of like the tools you use, are you isolated to just Figma and maybe like a code base, Google Docs? Like, how do you communicate changes you make to a design system with your team and make decisions? Like, do you follow like a framework or use any specific tools?
Yeah, I think it starts usually in Docs, whether it's like Google Docs, Confluence, or whatever you might be, Notion, and kind of defining what are the categories. I think we can use a lot of these examples like material, carbon, Polaris, etc., to kind of give us a blueprint or a baseline for what are kind of different categories we should have. And then within those, maybe they're not all applicable to my own app or website. And then start to document those and to list them out. And then from there, I'd probably shift into Figma, where you're starting to draw these out and building them properly with variables and styles and the tokens that we're talking about, which takes a lot of work. And then from there, you can put it into your code base. I think whether that's just in raw components like React components or CSS, or you're using like a Storybook or something like that to preview these and have them in their own kind of independent space. That's kind of a workflow that I might use. Cool. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So you mentioned that governance is one aspect of a design system.
Yeah.
I'm just curious on what does that process of governance looks like, especially when you're requesting a new component to be in the design system.
Yeah, can't remember who the article is by, which is my bad, but there was this amazing flow chart that someone put together that was like, step one, like, does this component exist, yes or no? And then if it's yes, it's like, can you modify an existing component or use their parameters to get to what you need? And if the answer is yes, then you continue on. If it's no, then would this require a brand new component? And then so like you follow that, and if it gets to we need a brand new component for this because it's like a whole different schema or whatever, then at that point you can submit through the proper channels, which could be like a Jira ticket or usually something like that to the if the governance is being handled by you have a design systems team, you're working at a larger company, then they receive those requests, and there's usually like a turnaround time or response time, all that stuff built in. If it's kind of more casual, it might be an email to your designer. So it kind of varies, but typically I think that flow chart's really beautiful in terms of like asking the right questions to say, is this a one-off thing or are we going to reuse it? Do we even need to add this to the design system? Because you don't want to stuff it with too much stuff, because that also causes confusion.
Thank you. So, quick question from your perspective, reviewing a lot of different designs, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think makes Tailwind CSS stand out compared to other frameworks like Bootstrap in the past or Material UI, which is currently running with Tailwind CSS?
Yeah, I think Material. So I think Bootstrap. Let's start there. That is more. You kind of have like UI elements already kind of packaged together. So actually, BTN Primary, which I had up there, is a Bootstrap lingo too, and that's just here's the button, right? And so there was an old thing where you could just look at an app and say, oh, this is a Bootstrap app. With Tailwind, it's much more customizable. I'll give it that, but that means you have to stack maybe like 7 classes to make it look more customizable. So I think that flexibility is why a lot of developers and companies really like it. You learn Tailwind once, and you can reuse it across a lot of different projects and apps. So I totally admit that's like a really powerful benefit of it. Versus even design systems, one of the downsides, which I didn't really talk about, is you have to learn it and learn how to use it. And if you go to another company, like it's probably not the same. And so it's definitely not the same. I can see you can see the head shape. So like that's a trade-off, right? And then Tailwind, it's kind of universal. There was a lot of stuff. There was like Atomic CSS. There was, anyways, yeah. But I think for some reason, one reason or another, probably because it's pretty comprehensive, it's very flexible, you have tools like Shadcn that also style with Tailwind, you know, is broadly used. So it's kind of like a React or something like that, where it's like, okay, like this seems to be the current meta of software development. Let's go ahead and do this. It's not too bad either. So
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate that.
yeah, thank you. Oh, one more.
How do you determine how far you go into building a design system? Say if you were working for a startup where maybe they have a component library.
Yeah.
Like how deep do you go into design systems straight off? Or how do you determine that?
Oh, that's hard. I think it depends is the actual answer. How would I determine? If I came to a company and they had an existing component library, I think first, yeah, you have to do an audit, like many other stuff. I think information architects and you know, if you're looking through systems website and you know, deciding what to keep and what to tear out, I think that's always going to be a question. But yeah, if I came to a company and they had an existing component library, first you ask a question like, do you like this? How much of this do you want to keep? Are we looking for a rebrand as part of this? Or are we just looking to organize what you have now into something that's reusable? And there could be a whole spectrum of that. If they just want to clean up their buttons and forms so it just looks nicer on their webpage, like that's a more simple project, and I still think gives you a huge benefit as a company because you're not like manually and hand coding all these things that's ultra error prone. But if somebody, you know, a larger company, again, there's that list of goals that we had for why you might create a design system. If we start going into like external or third-party adoption and having it be customizable and themable, those are different design considerations that you'll probably take it much further. So I think, yeah, the short answer is ask the company or team what the goals are behind it first, and then we can go from there. Amazing.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. All righty. So we're going to do a quick break. Uh-oh. Where'd we go? And before our workshop, so if you guys want to just please eat some of the food. Thought you were going to be hungrier than you were. We got these prompts here if you want to participate with that. This one is, what's the most consequential naming decision you've made and what did it teach you? Over here we've got, when information is organized, whose understanding of the world gets used as the template? All right. You can like leave your thoughts on a Post-it or write on one of those there. Again, there's food. Keep the bingo thing going. Yeah, so lunch will be after the workshop. So workshop will be up there. We'll round you all up and have you go over there when it's time. But you can either chill in here or out there. And that's about it. I was going to do some can't unsee for anyone who wants to stay in here and mess around with that. If you guys haven't seen that. So coming off the designer thing, I thought I might do that. Is anyone gonna chill in here, or everyone wanna stretch their legs?
There's one here. We were just going to share this one.
That's before you can. I mean, these all work. So should he sit down or just stand next to you?
You can, I mean, do you want to sit? Yeah, you can sit off to all the chairs over there maybe or something. Or, yeah, okay.
Check, check. How was lunch, everybody? Pretty good. Thumbs up, thumbs down? We have one thumbs up. All right. I'll take it. All right, folks, welcome back and to 2026 World IA Day. We have, a round of applause. How about a round of applause for Lucky Boy Lunch? Thank you for somewhat sponsoring. Give us a discount. We'll take it. All right, cool. So I think that's everybody. So up next we have for you interaction design at Art Center, where we are. You can see amazing stuff all around you. Please have a look around. And we have
Todd Masilko. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, hi, I'm Todd Masilko, chair of the Interaction Design Department here at Art Center. So I guess we're off and rolling. All right. Hey, thank you for being here. I know World IA Day has been at Art Center before. Has anybody been here before at Art Center? Perhaps. That's great if you're back. We love having World IA Day at Art Center. And in exchange for making our rooms available, we always say we would really love the chance for some of our students to show work. I think it'll be relevant to the topic of the event, so I think it'll be interesting. But we love the chance for you to be here, and also we love the chance to share some of our students' work with you. So welcome. I'm going to take just 2 or 3 minutes to talk about the department. That will actually give some context for the work that the students will share as well, and I hope make it, give it a little context and make it make sense in terms of the structure of the courses and the curriculum within which that work is being done. So actually, I should have already been letting this video run. I'm going to play a little bit of work on the screen as I talk. What you're seeing on the screen is some video documentation from our most recent Art Center graduate show. This is the interaction design part of the grad show. If any of you are interested or have somebody in the family interested in what we do at Art Center, each December and April, when we have graduation here at the college, we put on a big show at the Pasadena Convention Center. Every graduating school in the college shows project work. It's actually quite amazing. We do a huge build out, we run this thing for 2 days, and then we take it all apart. It's free, you should check it out. I think one of the things that I hope is evident from the footage is in the interaction program here at Art Center, we're pretty proud of the fact that in addition to the screen-based interaction work, UI, UX, UX research, IA, I mean, the way that sort of when I became an interaction designer, most things were screen-based, UI-based. Our student project work today in our classes, obviously we still do all of those things, but as you'll see in the presentation as it unfolds, we're deep into new input systems for spatial computing, game engines as prototyping tools, obviously AI and machine learning, just like the industry, the curricular landscape changes all the time and very, very quickly. And specifically, the interaction department where I work, we now have 3 different degree programs in the department. Originally, we just had one, which was the about 12-year-old Bachelor of Science in Interaction Design undergraduate program. Our student presenters are from that program. We combined a few years back with a long-standing, really interesting Master of Fine Art program called Media Design Practices here at Art Center that is a grad program with 2- and 3-year options. Many students graduates out of that program have pursued careers in various interaction design and interaction design adjacent fields, so we kind of merged. And then the thing that's most recent is, as of about 2.5 years ago, we launched a graduate interaction program, which is there's a new kind of degree we call it the MDes. It's a Master of Design degree. It's a 1-year degree program. There's 1 or 2 alum in the audience, I think, today from this program. So this is a 1-year grad program aimed entirely at working professional designers, not necessarily working professional interaction designers, but working professionals who have some kind of a design background who would like to then pursue graduate studies, specifically in interaction design. It's a fantastic program. We have an online program and are exploring other kind of hybrid and potentially in-person offerings in that one as well. It's been quite popular and successful. I'll let another video run as I talk. So as this one cycles through, this is more of just a little bit of a snippet of the work, and you're going to see UI, Figma prototyping, UI micro-interaction examples. You're also going to see some stuff that just appear to be animated composition studies. There's one I'm going to wait for. Oh, XR prototyping, gesture prototyping, lots of physical computing. There's a really fun one with like a lip and a tongue. I don't know if that one went through already. But as we deal with both the ubiquity of tools like Figma and design systems and design components, the accessibility of AI coding assistance, we have embraced that, but we've also found a need from a curricular standpoint to almost emphasize more than ever some of the very, very foundational skills in design. So composition studies, color, writing. So like that one, for example, the lip, like why are we making a lip thing in an UI prototyping class? Because we're trying to get the students to articulate like, this is all about pull, and I'm gonna do 10 different, touch studies that play with that topic, and we get really funky and creative, and it helps us be able to learn how to articulate and execute a very, very specific design intent, which then helps us later when we're building out maybe a bigger, more complicated system like an autonomous vehicle visualization or something like that. So yeah, the curriculum is in a real state of change right now due to the rapid rate of change in the tech landscape. One other thing to point out, if you're not familiar with the history of Art Center, there's a couple of curricular aspects of Art Center that are long-standing. One of them is what we call transdisciplinary studios. That's basically, think of like students from 2 or 3 different majors working together in a class with a partner or a project brief. We do these all the time in students' upper terms of study, and we oftentimes do these, not always, but oftentimes in partnership with outside sponsors. So here are some examples of that. And this happens across the college, not just in interaction design, but we're doing a couple of really interesting sponsored studios just this term. Some of the student work you're about to see, one of the projects is from a sponsored studio. So you'll get to see a little bit more about that. And then right here in this building, right over there, is, it's just a classroom, but it's a really cool classroom that we call the Immersion Lab. It's kind of our hub for teaching classes that involve emerging tech, new interaction models, and a lot of experimental prototyping. So this has been around maybe somewhere around 10 or 11 years. And over time, originally it was mostly like VR work. Nowadays, new input systems, lots of sensing, computer vision, obviously AI, machine learning, model training, and that kind of stuff. We do lots of that in our immersion lab. It's a core part of our curriculum. One of the projects that you'll see is an example of that. Oh, and then the note at the bottom of the slide, unified by the game engine. This is a big, big deal. I'm not sure if it's a big deal industry-wide, but here at Art Center, Unity and Unreal, in particular, game engines, as prototyping tools are sort of permeating the curriculum, particularly if we're doing something like an automotive UX or HMI project. Our students are working directly in those game engine tools. And that's really interesting because after doing work like that, they end up then maybe even taking like a virtual production class and are finding work in a kind of adjacent fields that, again, 5 years ago, we just weren't seeing that kind of thing happening. So here's a couple examples of just screen record prototype. One of these would be a student experimenting with some gesture interaction intended for AR, but prototyped with a VR headset. And then again, like kind of on the other side of the developer, the kind of designer as scientist side, this is that same student, Jacob, just trying to get a sense of accuracy, calibration of the eye tracking. He was doing some work with eye tracking, so we spend a lot of time in the immersion lab, maybe half a class understanding the capabilities of new technology and tools, and then we do a project. So that's also a way of sequencing a class or planning project work that's a little bit different than maybe when I started teaching a couple of decades back. So I'm going to stop talking, and I would like to have a couple of our students in our program share some work. So I'm going to hand the mic to Keller, or Keller already has a mic. Come on up, Keller, and I'll get out of the way. So Keller, thank you.
Hello. Oh, this one's working. And our sponsor is Cedars-Sinai, who is a nonprofit academic healthcare organization down in downtown LA. And our project is developed in collaboration with their cancer screening and prevention team. The brief that we were given is to design an AI-empowered tool that supports community navigators in delivering trusted, culturally tailored cancer screening information and resources to underserved communities in downtown LA. Let's talk about community navigators since they are the main user of our project. So who are they? They are trained professionals, mostly nurses, social workers, and community health workers. Their goal is to get people screened for cancer screening, receive treatment, and to make sure that no one gets lost throughout the cancer health system. This is a general timeline of how this courses was laid out. So at the week 1, we had a kickoff meeting with our sponsor and proceeded with a 6-week-long research session. And we're going to do a quick check-in with our sponsors and start the ideation process. The final 6 weeks are the prototyping phase, where at the end, we're going to present to our sponsors of the final project or the final outcome that we've developed. Throughout the research process, we've worked closely with the design team or the research team at Cedars-Sinai and also subject matter experts. And we've identified 2 main barriers when it comes to the problem that we're trying to solve. Barriers in navigators' workflow and barriers in how AI and information in general is having trust issues within this sensitive medical context. This is the cancer continuum. So the navigator's job is to help people throughout this process, from prevention to screening to diagnosis to treatment and survivorship, to help them understand what they need to be doing for each step. For example, get screened, explain a diagnosis, support their treatment decisions, and also work alongside patient all the way through their survivorship. And each step, there are consistent human presence, making sure that people don't fall through the cracks throughout this process. 2 numbers surprised us when we were doing this research. About half of the navigators feel they are not sufficiently trained for the job they are demanded to do. Most are learning complex communication and coordination skills on the job. And at the same time, they're managing 5 to 20 patients simultaneously. So this leaves, and remember, like for each patient, they might be at a different stage throughout the cancer continuum, and each of them have different needs, have different barriers, and have different fears when it comes to cancer, because cancer is a pretty scary word. And as time goes on, as a navigator, their cognitive and administrative load goes up, and their time available for real human connections and trust building between community members and the navigators goes down. And basically, that's the problem that we're trying to tackle. And in this case, it just makes sense for AI to handle this heavy administrative workload, right? So navigators can regain their time and energy to build those meaningful connections between them and the community members and patients. But we had to confront a harder question. Would anyone actually trust AI in this sensitive medical environment? The answer is no. Nearly 3/4 of the people we are trying to reach are already skeptical of the use of AI in healthcare system. And since one of our design goals is using AI to support navigators in delivering these cancer materials to community members and patients more effectively, we need to figure out a way to foster the trust between navigators, between patients, between community members, and between AI. Here are some basics that we can do. Always keep a human in loop and verifying everything before it reaches to a patient. For HIPAA compliance, not directly sharing patient data to the AI, and be transparent on the sources of each AI's output. But the information might still feel too clinical or too distant or too foreign to a patient or a community member, even with these constraints. So what's missing here, right? Throughout the research, we found out that it's actually the community or the personal context that's most important when it comes to having someone to trust and information that's given to them. So this is how the information flows from medical resources through AI to navigators to the community members. But the context might get stripped through two intersections here. Cultural relevance might be lost from AI to navigators, and personal relevance might get lost if navigators goes into a conversation without knowing enough about the person they're talking with. So the question we ask ourselves is, how may we reduce navigators' cognitive load while supporting them in communicating with cultural awareness and clarity during their interactions with community members and patients? And it goes down to our final design. This is our overall navigation, or IA. The Home, Patient, and Resources tab together helps navigators with day-to-day tasks and reduce these administrative and cognitive load. Senna AI on the right serve as a central space where they can go if they need more help, but also serve as a quiet layer throughout the other three tabs inside Home, Patient, Profile at the right moment. Let's talk about Home first. On the homepage, this is a clear at-a-glance view of appointments, follow-ups, and daily priorities. So navigators can feel organized and focused on actually caring for the patient themselves. Notice you can see some tasks labeled Senna suggested. These are context-aware suggestions based on the navigator's calendar and patient activity. Let's talk about the patient tab. So at the top, there's a high-level view of the entire patient population that this navigator is managing. And clicking one would show you the list of the patient within that group. So the goal of this feature is to help navigators quickly understand screening process across all the patients that they are managing. At the bottom is a list of patients who needs immediate attention. This can be flagged by Senna based on patient information or flagged manually by the navigator themselves. The intention of this feature is to address the fact that navigators often manage large amount of patients, and this makes it easier for them to spot who needs urgent follow-ups quickly. A patient profile includes these three pieces of information: an overview, which includes their screening journey, interaction histories, and contact information. This is a place for navigators to reference a patient's preference and context based on past interactions. Senna can also suggest administrative tasks based on the patient's status. Let's talk about resources. Except for general newsfeed, there's a weekly AI-generated summary of the most important cancer-related updates and news for community navigators. This feature keeps navigators up to date without overwhelming them. They can also tap any medical terms for a plain language explanation with Senna without going outside this page. Next is the Senna tab. This is where navigators can get AI support in the moment. Senna works like a simple chatbot. Navigators can ask questions with natural language to quickly look up cancer-related information and clarify what they are seeing. Navigators can also add patient context, which includes past interactions and any notes they took of this patient. So Senna can produce more tailored responses for this patient. It is also important to note that patient ID in this case is not shared or linked with their preferences when shared with Senna. Only preferences are shared with Senna so that AI does not introduce any patient bias. Next, let's talk about one of the main features of this app. The problem is this. So navigators often move from one conversation to another very quickly. There's very little time to slow down and reflect and capture everything that mattered for that patient that they were talking with. So important details like fear, preferences, barriers often live in their memories or quick notes. And over time, this just doesn't scale well. So the question we asked was, how may we support navigators' outreach so that patients feel remembered, supported, while navigators can feel prepared for the meeting that they are going with? We explored some ideas, for example, like AI-assisted responding messages and AI-assisted call and note-taking. But these solutions took away the human part in the communication between navigators and patients. So we asked ourselves, how can we solve this issue without AI actually listening in and automating the judgment for the navigators? We took a look at what are the data that we can record and analyze. Obviously, we can't use any data without consent, but we can use basic health information, navigators' notes from past interactions, and responses from patients in which they know about our intention. So the scenario is this. Lucas, who is the community navigator, has scheduled a call with Maria and prompting her to do a screening appointment. 3 days before the call, Senna would suggest a pre-call survey to share with Maria. And they can share with Maria the link. And in this way, they would know that, so like we would have some basic information about the patient, but this step is to make sure that we're adding an additional layer of context. For example, the call that they're going to discuss about to support the accuracy of the output of the AI to support the navigators. Right before the call, based on all the context information the app has collected, past interactions, the new survey result that they got back, Senna can generate a pre-call brief so navigators can enter their conversation prepared and aligned with what they need to discuss about. This would include information like the context of the call, patient snapshot, and on any conversation guide, for example, like opening or closing statement, or frequently asked questions so that navigators are better prepared. This reduces cognitive load while it provides tailored support to the patient before the call even begins. During the call, there's nothing happening with our app as we want the navigators to be fully present and interacting with the patient. And after the call, the interaction is marked as complete. Navigators can rate how effective the outreach is, which helps organizations like Cedars-Sinai to know how effective their outreach is. And based on the call and patient context, Senna suggests next steps, such as follow-ups or any resources sharing. Navigators can also add quick notes about the patient and interaction while the details are still fresh. These information would also feed into the patient context in the future. For future projections, we're imagining there would be a companion app alongside with Senna. So Senna is the Navigators platform. We imagine there will be an app targeted for the community member or the patient themselves. So we can enable features like built-in messaging and calls, deeper analysis of members' preferences, and things like fully automated administrative workload. And that's it for this project. Thank you so much. And
Okay, we got one more. Leo will present the next. I'm going to try to dim the light, Leo. If it doesn't work, just keep going, but I'm going to try to dim a little bit.
Okay, guys. Hello, everyone. My name is Leo, and thank you for visiting here today. I'm also in interaction design term 5 at Art Center. And as a designer, I enjoy using 3D tools and game engines to prototype human-machine interfaces and the concepts and bring interfaces to the life. So the project that I'm going to introduce to you guys is called STAG, a next-generation user interface for autonomous agricultural agents. So the class I have took for this project was called Advanced Interaction Design Studio Mobility, which is basically a course that explores interaction design through the lens of mobility and ending with a real-life prototype with the Unreal Engine 5. So students basically had the freedom to choose any type of thing that was, as long as it was related to mobility. So this was the timeline for my project. I initially started with some research, then started from week 3, I jumped into rapid prototyping using Figma and also AI prototypes. Also, from week 8, I had some midterm check-in to see how I was going with my professors and some guest visitors. And from that, I started to push my final video and final design using Unreal Engine and After Effects. And after that, at week 14, I had my final presentation. So initially, I also thought when I was choosing this topic that was related to mobility, the first that came into mind was the vehicle and the head-up displays. But my professor gave me a feedback that everyone is already doing this, and there is nothing really meaningful behind this because it just looks cool in some way. So that's why I jumped into really interesting field that I've never actually heard of before, which was the autonomous agriculture. And I thought this was a really compelling topic for me because it has the system level of information architecture. There was an opportunity of human and AI collaboration. And also there was some opportunity for me to design some interfaces because it had some complex spatial data visualization. So today's contents will be research, rapid prototyping, and final design. And I'll start off with some of my research process. So at first, I realized that the United States population was steadily increasing. And by 2035, it was estimated that there will be 354.5 million people living in the States, which means as the population grows, the food demand also increases. However, when you look at this graph, the agricultural workforce, since 1960s, there was 60% of human labor force was lost, and which is a massive loss. And also, the average age of farmers are 58.1 years old, and roughly 34% of American farmers are now over 65 years old, which is an age usually people when they retire their jobs. So when you think about typical professions such as software, finance, and retail, they might just say, oh, we could just replace the old generation with a younger generation. However, the agriculture industry is a little bit different. Due to high capital costs, there isn't really a specific people who can directly replace the old generation. Some might just say young people aren't really just interested in like farming and they just think it's not cool, but the actual reason was the financial barrier behind it. So with this growing demand and an unreplaceable labor force, I saw this gap between these two as my design opportunity. So my initial question was, what if farmers could manage and supervise their farms remotely through autonomous systems? So right now, the industry is relying on a single operator model, which means they need one operator per one machines. However, I believe in 2035, it'll all shift into autonomous fleet operation, where there'll be one operator controlling the entire fleet, multiple tasks simultaneously. And there's a company called John Deere, which is an American company that designs and manufactures agricultural, construction, and forestry machinery. And they're also now trying to shift from selling machines and to deploy autonomous ecosystems. And that's why I chose this company for my project. So my design statement was, how might the farmers command an autonomous fleet in 2035? And now I'm going to share my rapid prototyping. So I started off by just looking at how the John Deere's tractors and the machines had in their interfaces right now. So I was looking at what kind of information they're putting in, what's the interaction, what kind of visuals they're using. And after that, I pulled out some data nodes that were relevant to my autonomous futuristic system, and then I went to and organized them to make some information architecture. And also I have made a data user journey map to see how users will actually going to navigate through my interfaces. So I also made some low fidelity prototype of my command center of how this interface will be and live in the screens. But at this point, I was asking myself, am I really solving a problem in this design, or am I just making a copy of what is existing? Because when you just look at this, it's just basically the same. So I thought the current interfaces are built for operators, which is driver focused with high information density. But in 2035, the farmer is a strategist. So the information must be summarized, predictive, and decision-oriented. And now I'm going to share my final design. So the full name of Stack is Synchronized Tactical Autonomous Grid. And this was my interface, which is a digital interface where farmers can manage autonomous fleets. So in more detail, the Stack Command Center contains 4 information groups, and at the bottom, there's a digital twin button where they could shift from 2D and 3D, which I'm going to share later. So basically, the Stack is using the map-based grid system as a background, and it features a dynamic map that highlights completed work areas and shows the real-time location of each autonomous machines. And also, like other Google Maps or map navigations, users can pan and zoom around it. And this was prototyped by the After Effects and Figma. So on the left side, there are active missions, which is displaying a real-time list and a status of all tasks. And on the top, there is a mission title with an icon. So every mission will have their own unique colors and their icons because it'll be using the same colors for the maps. And it also shows the progress bars, and it also displays a list of machines. And in more detail, each group of machines running the same task is assigned a distinct shape for instant recognition. So which means when it's displaying circle 6H, it means there will be 6 circles of harvester moving in the screen and 3 combiners in a triangle moving in the screen. And on the right side, there is a task overview, which is displaying a real-time status and a key performance metrics, such as daily harvest rate, moisture level, unit status, and a logistics chain. And at the bottom in the same panel, there's also will be a thing that will appear when an anomaly is detected. The system, the AI agent in this stack, will allow farmers to provide the final operation decision. And on the top, there's a system status bar, which is a high priority header that displays a real-time operational metrics. From the left, there's the operational performance, which shows the system efficiency, harvest rate, and a daily goal. And at the center, there's an emergency stop button. And on the right, there's an environmental and time status. So this is one of the coolest features that this stack has, which is a digital twin. And this is an immersive 3D digital view of the farmland, allowing the user to virtually enter the field and interact with these autonomous machines. And I believe in 2035, because there will be multiple cameras attached to the machines, and due to high-resolution satellite imagery and live sensor from the fleet, I believe this will all be possible. This was all prototyped with the game engine that was called as Unreal Engine, and also I used the After Effects to put the UI on top of it. So in more detail, on the left side, there's a location, and also there's a mini-map now, so users could see where they're looking at. And also there are AR data overlays for each machine on the top. It contains the unit identifiers, activity status, bin level, and a temperature. So some might ask why this digital twin will be powerful in this industry. And let's say there is a soybean harvester that has detected an unidentified obstacle. And as you can see in the screen, it became all yellow, and there's like notifications going on, and the progress bar all became yellow too. So the machine in here is that prioritizing the safety, it has paused the operations to prompt the farmer for a final override decision. But when we still look at this task overview panel, it is still lacking the spatial context, which is leading to lack of confidence. So now when user clicks the tap to inspect button, now they could actually jump into the actual visual confirmation that the object was just a harmless bark. So it is using so now it is making user could simply press override to continue the operation. So in more detail, the system is highlighting the obstacle with an AR data overlay again, and it transforms the abstract data and the 2D locations into an intuitive, immersive visual experience, providing the spatial context and the confidence. So in summary, Stag is built for strategists to manage the entire territory, not just the machines. And thank you for listening to my presentation.
I think are we okay on time? I don't know if there's time for any Q&A, but okay, I mean, we could take a couple for Keller and Leo if anybody would like to ask a question.
I have a question about this last one. I've heard a lot about these games that people play called, what are they called?
Like farming simulators?
Well, farm simulators, but more generally that they are, you like check on them, you know. Anyway, I'll think of the name. But do you think that in the future people will play idle games, that's what they're called, idle games, but then they'll just be farming?
I also reference a lot of like game related, like that is related to farming. And I also said like in the future, it could possibly be like the jobs could be more like a game wise because it'll all be in like screens and people will be interacting in it. Yeah.
I'm curious, have you seen Clarkson's Farm on Netflix?
TV show.
It's actually on Prime Video.
No.
It's an interesting. I was saying Clarkson's Farm on. Not on advertising this show, but it's sort of a fascinating. But there is a huge farm economy, and I actually went to a UX conference and met a UX designer, and he worked on a team of 100 other UX designers on John Deere, and the autonomous vehicle technology that they have is more accurate. They can move a combine on a dime from space. So it's actually like this is more sort of closer to your outputs, but the translation of farmer person working in the land to technologists is a lot larger gap than I think we're sort of recognizing, and that some of the things you're sort of showing is like, well, who is that? And the idea of like, oh, I could just like a person, you know. We now have these autonomous things that do that, but it's sort of an interesting idea of like how do you translate even the UI to sort of translate like what that equals for their understanding and their logic. But interesting concept.
Yeah, I agree. When I was like looking some of like insights from actual farmers, they also said like when they are actually operating like tractors and machines, they usually have like human errors that they make. But when they move into like autonomous machines, they said, oh, they'll less have like some of errors or like mistakes they make, or like some like things that could possibly miss when they're driving tractors. So they said these autonomous systems will be really powerful, and also they were a little bit worried about then what can I do too. So that's why I was arguing they'll become more like strategists who make plans beyond just like farming systems.
Hi, just great job on the presentations. These were very excellent. As for Stag, were you able to get this in front of like farmers? I know you mentioned that the current age of farmers were like pretty older, so like how did they react to this like updated interface?
Oh, that's what I actually really wish to do, to be honest. I also got some feedbacks when I was showing the screens, like, because I made the map interface really dark, and some said like when the farmers are actually using this outside, there will be like reflections happening a lot. So I got a lot of feedbacks like you should make some like text bigger and some of like design systems more clear so the actual old farmers can use it. Probably that'll be my next steps after this concept. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. Great job. I love it. I have a question about the second one, Stack. And just wondering about the users, and because I have a family working in shrimp farms, so it has to do with a lot of little lakes with shrimp. They have to collect all that. I was thinking about your user interface. Have you ever think about creating a design system, an open source design system for anyone to grab and build whatever they need on top of that? I think that'll be great. I mean,
Yeah,
especially because from the perspective of the farmer, they don't have a lot of money to invest on something like that.
I could probably do that. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I'll be looking to see it.
Yeah, the design system will be complex because I have to probably do a lot of interviews with them, like dealing some more like user testings. But yeah, I could probably, if I have this like design system clear, I'll like to like push this in like open source so farmers could use it.
My questions are more for Sana. I guess the same question is similar. It's like, have you gotten it in front of navigators? Like have you done some testing on navigators in the field with the app, or maybe just got their feedback?
Yes, so we've had been in contact with navigators throughout the actual course. At the middle, we had a review with navigators to see if this is actually what navigators are hoping for or if they need. And at the end, navigators were present in the final presentation to see if this is actually something that can be operated and something that they can implement into the actual working force.
And what was like the overwhelming like result? Because you have navigators performing multiple tasks at the same time, right? But then you're trying to have them be on their phone during this process. So like, I mean, what was the main benefit of that? And what was like one of the main drawbacks that you saw? Because one of the applications I'm thinking about is probably surgery coordinator more than a navigator.
Yeah, so there's a slight difference between community navigators and nurse navigators. Community navigators are more towards like outreach events that are happening in the community, supporting those events. They are not technically working inside the hospital to get through the actual diagnosis or treatment. So for them, it's actually much easier to have it on a phone device so that they can access this at any time that they might need. And also, we kind of designed this specifically in a way that to try to keep the actual interaction or try to keep the actual integrity of real human interaction between the navigators and community members or patients without the app interfering with that actual interaction. Yeah.
I think the last thing is just a compliment on your AI aspect of the app. I think because it reminded me of ChatGPT. It was more inviting in terms of like typing in a question for like whatever you needed carried out. I don't know if that influenced you at all in the design of that component.
Yeah, so the name Sana actually comes from Spanish. If I remember correctly, it means to get well. And we actually built around the AI persona around this Sana concept. And we had a figure of a red panda, which in some cultures or in the Latinx community, which we choose to target for this project, that the red panda character or the persona feels more natural and feels more friendly in this scary medical context.
Thank you, everybody, for the great questions. We got one more. We have one more. A couple more. Yeah.
Sorry, just one more for Sana. And again, I know you've heard this, but these projects are both amazing, and I'm really, really impressed with the work you've all done. You talked about sort of an aspect of cultural translation, or maybe almost an interrupt in the system. Could you speak a little bit about the degree to which Sana tries to bridge those maybe differences in culture?
Yes, so in terms of culture, for this project, we targeted towards the Latinx community, but to expand on that, maybe expanding towards more communities, we're thinking we can, not only in a design system-wise, for example, the Red Panda I introduced, maybe there could be some other personas that feels more natural in that community's context. But also, cultural contexts come with language barriers as well, right? Sana can act as a way to tailor those cancer terms or medical intensive terms that might not feel friendly or feel scary if just translated directly. And Sana can help with that by introducing cultural context and also personal context or personal relevance in this process so that the final outcome feels more tailored to the person who's receiving it.
Yeah, great presentations. I think to both of the students, just really polished and impressive. But I had a question for Sana. You mentioned on the other question you've spoke with navigators throughout the process, and I think that kind of shows in the UI and the UX that you walked us through. I'm also curious if you thought about, from like the patient side of things, what that, because on screen you see send a pre-call survey, so 3 days beforehand, and for many of us who aren't in the medical field, we, it feels kind of like a gatekeeper, a survey, and something that we don't enjoy doing. So did you think about like maybe an agent or AI layer to make that nicer as well? I know you obviously had a lot on your plate in 14 weeks or so maybe not, but I'm curious if you thought through that angle.
Yeah, we did. So throughout, when we were working on this project, it just felt natural that not only navigators have access to the amazing opportunities that AI offers, but also the community members themselves might also benefit from the capabilities of AI. And that could also contribute to the goal that we're trying to solve, to reduce the navigators' cognitive and administrative workload, where AI can take part of the responsibility of the navigator off. And we did talk about, in future projections, we are imagining there would be a separate app, a companion app, targeted for community members and patients for them to use to better support them throughout the cancer continuum.
Is there one more? One more question? Okay, great.
My question's for Sana. I actually started my career as a navigator, so I was really happy to see like a application up there. I really liked it, so thank you for your presentation. My question was that if you've thought about like an integration with insurance, because as we all know, health insurance is really big in healthcare, and I didn't see any mention of insurance, but I did see medical notes, and I guess I was just wondering if you guys have thought like in the future as to what that would look like integrating with insurance providers and insurance billing.
So I think of that as like 2 levels, because insurance is a big part of the barriers that consist of patients getting screened, right? And the first layer is we have information, for example, the patient's insurance status to the navigators themselves, so that they have a context of what the patient situation is. But I agree, if we can introduce to integrate with insurance companies or billing themselves, it can be more beneficial for the community members app, for them to better understand what their status is. And if we're going to integrate these 2 apps, it will be also benefit the navigators as well. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you guys. Next up, we have another speaker, Justine. Yeah. We'll just get set up here real fast.
Thank you. So this talk is going to look at about how we can be more intentional in our work and what it takes to solve problems with people at their core. So, how this talk started. I have 3 very, very judgy cats, and they're judging me all the time. And they have opinions about what I'm doing wrong all the time. And so this is the context of how I work. You know, we're in a world where we move fast, break things, and I don't know about you, but I find that very exhausting. I find it very exhausting to have to do a project 4 times because the people who are setting the project keep changing their minds about what the goal of that project needs to be. You know, if we had that sort of runway to do the project once well, that would be amazing. And so where do we have to slow the process down? Where do we maybe even have to slow the people connections down so that we have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish before we start, and we can use as much runway as possible to actually get the project done? So I have an example from my time in telecoms, which is called Why I Hate Reorgs. So I was with this company for 3 years, and over those 3 years, I was reorganized 5 times. And you know, you convince yourself, the people are great. These are amazing, bright, wonderful people to work with. I have to actually do my part of the job. But every time you get reorged, you have to get to know your new team, get to know how they work, get to know how you work together and produce quality stuff together. And at the same time, you start seeing that in leadership, people are using the same words around a reorg. We're trying to do this. Your team will work on that. But they all actually have really different ideas of what that means. And so because things are, and obviously you can't get a heads up about a reorg. You're going to find out about it when you find out about it when it's happening. But why I hate reorgs is there isn't time to negotiate and figure out how this will work well. You're spending the first 2 months on your new team figuring that out and making sure you're touching base with everybody and making sure you're very gently letting people way above you know that their expectations are different from each other and they should really touch base on their side, right? And so this moving fast and breaking things approach can cause a lot of extra work, especially when humans are involved. Now, in January, they had this really, really great conference called Throughline. And, you know, we had some wonderful, like, heavy hitter speakers. We had, you know, Ron Bronson and Erica Hall and Pavel Samsonov. And it was really, really interesting to see these people at the top of our field talking about AI, talking about, you know, process and how we get these processes working right and how we get people working with each other so that this thing doesn't overwhelm us. And so I think really it's time to remember when and why we need design, to remind ourselves that the intentionality with our design and the opportunities to show what you can do aren't going to just form by themselves. They have to be negotiated, they have to be identified, and they have to be championed. So, you know, at this one organization, we were kept moving, right? And everything was going to be in V2, right? This was the MVP. The really cool things weren't going to fit in. We were going to come back. So we ended up negotiating with our amazing PM to do catch-up sprints. Once every 6 months, we'd get 2 weeks to work on stuff we felt was really, really important to catch up and to actually get this stuff working better. So a lot of context, but let's jump in. Some guiding questions for you as we move through this talk in the interest of being intentional and more introspective. Where are you delivering value in your role? How do you set goals and intentions for your projects, whether they be information architecture or other kinds of design? And which elements of your process do you want to preserve as part of your practice rather than automating or handing off to some of these summarization and agentic engines? So, as you think about these, let's move forward. And thank you very, very much to the Broad for having these beautiful new Anselm Kiefer pieces that they have up right now. If you're not from LA, Broad is free and very, very much worth visiting several times a year as you bounce through their different special exhibits. All right, so IA is the tools that we use to structure and provide access to content, right? Whether it's organization or labeling or navigation or search systems. It includes taxonomy, labels, tags, filters, and all of these other ways that we use to structure and organize our content. And there's a lot of new trends in IA, right? Some of these aren't new. Some of these, you know, as you come in here more often, as you take time, you see things looping back, right? So maybe somebody was talking about something in 2002, and all of a sudden, I find myself going back to these books from the early aughts where people were like, designers have no power anymore. We need to come back. We need to figure out what we're good at doing, right? And so one of the new trends, again, we're not talking about SEO anymore. We're talking about generative engine optimization. And how do we improve our content and brand presence so it can easily be scanned and our brand is included in the results and we're mentioned and we're seen as important, right? How can we improve AI search so that it leads back to the results instead of just summarizing them? And you know, Claude, my pal Claude, is getting better and better at doing that. And I really appreciate that it tells me where it got its information because, again, there's that trust issue, right? We'll talk about that soon. There's personalization, that's huge. If you work in any agency, they're all trying to use AI for personalization right now. And you know, we come up against HIPAA, we come up against all of the rules that say we can't have all of your personal information to personalize, but we try to figure it out. We try to figure out what intent you're coming to a website or to an app with and meet you where you're at, right? And we're seeing, and this might actually be a little bit like rose-colored glasses, but at least we're seeing articles about a return to a content-first mapping, where people are like, how do we structure that content? Sure, it's gonna be in different containers, but how do we actually make this work for AI? So we're talking all about this certain sort of stuff, you know, people who are used to having a walled garden where they control everything all of a sudden are having to think about, you know, how do we get our brand to show up in Reddit threads because we know they're crawling the Reddit threads, right? And is this stuff really that different when we're creating apps and products and structure for our products? Really, it goes back to, you know, what we were doing when people were first creating websites and were saying, here's all my content. And, you know, when those websites ended up on phones and they were like, my content is this long, right? So we're actually going back to basics and we're saying this requires strong writing, it requires taxonomies, it requires tagging, and doing all of this content well is still going to get you the results that you want because geo changes from month to month and you can be at the top this month and all of a sudden the algorithm changed or all of a sudden somebody else reworked their content and you're at the bottom. And so you can't over-focus on these things. You have to be aware of them, you have to understand how they work, but you have to also still be designing well and doing IA well as you've been doing it all along. So, what does IA have to achieve? You know, I like to talk, I don't know if anybody still has stereos, but I like to talk about dials, right? When you're doing sitemaps, when you're doing naming, they're not the big volume dial. Everything is a small dial, right? You've got little adjustments, whether, you know, it's a brand dial on whatever labels you're using in your, in your sitemap, in your taxonomy, whether you're trying to figure out scope and context and how things might need to be extensible in the future and where you need to have to find space in your site or your app because you know what the roadmap looks like. Whether you're talking about information sent and understanding your audience and how they look for things. These are all small dials, right? We're not going to reinvent anything, but we're going to dial in on that right audience and make sure we get our perspective across. And like, this is maybe unintuitive to some people, but your sitemap gets across who you are. And you want to make sure you're using the right words in it so people know who you are, what you do, how you approach that might be a little bit different than your competitors, right? So, you know, obviously you need to do user research, heuristic valuations, usability testing, iteration, content validation. All of that stuff comes into this. But this is our bread and butter. If you've been doing IA, you're still doing IA, you just have a few new things to pay attention to. But maybe there's this part of it. There's the part where humans are complicated, right? And so Hope Olson, like one of the grandmothers of information architecture, back in classification days and, you know, library books and all that, technology is practice, and it includes social, cultural, political aspects of making things work. So people will say, can I be a designer without being political? Of course you can't. You can't be a human being and alive today without being political. You take a stance every time, you know, you leave the house or even get on any one of your devices, right? And that's a social stance, a cultural stance, a political stance. And as you do your information architecture and you learn to understand your key users, your audiences, they also have social, cultural, political stances. Your stakeholders have these stances. And it's a complex environment of small communications and getting to know each other and growing trust so that you can actually do a good job. And that's a thing that's a lot of tacit information. Most of that isn't explicit. So when I go and talk to my, you know, favorite engine and start having a chat with them, it's very difficult for me to make all that stuff explicit. And sometimes it's even dangerous to make it explicit, right? It's things sometimes are unsaid for a reason, but we all need to understand what's going on. So again, going back to Hope Olson, she was advocating in The Power to Name, which is, again, a book that if you're an academic, you get excited about, and nobody else should take the time to read. But she was taking a stance for eccentric rather than normative classification techniques. And so not looking at creating a boundary, but at breaching that boundary, at making it permeable and redefining it or letting people, you know, build it out over time. Making spaces rather than filling them. So again, thinking about people who are othered, perhaps, and helping them find a space for them and let their information fit within the broader structure. And again, this is all sort of, because this was a long time ago, something that's intuitive to all of us today, but being dynamic, right? We build our systems for growth and for change over time. All right, this section took a little longer, but let's jump into trust and flattery. They did a study, if you will believe, and the study said that if a system is nice to us and flattering to us, we think more highly of how it performs. So if you think about Claude, I personally am very aware of the fact that I like Claude best, and I hate Gemini, but I like Claude best because it's really nice to me. I don't actually necessarily think it performs better, but I enjoy using it better. And so that's, you know, for however part of my day, I would rather interact with software, I'm old school, that I enjoy using than with something that I feel like I can't fully trust, right? So let's remember, trust sometimes means flattery, but it sometimes means honesty, right? So you've got this whole field of persuasive design. We won't get into that today. But let's remember that you may not always be the champion for your user. but you also shouldn't be out to trick people. And, you know, you shouldn't be out to like be getting one over on them. Because no matter what we want around growth and around systems, around sales, your repeat customer is the cheaper customer. Having to get new customers over and over because your existing customers are leaving is really, really expensive. And so no matter what, trust and brand and consistency is always going to remain important in all of your designs. It's also something you build across interactions over time. So when you think about that design, think about the first visit, think about somebody who's known you for years, those interactions need to feel the same. And those relationships and collaborations over time with your stakeholders are the same, right? You're building out those design relationships so that once they've known you for 6 months, once they've known you for 2 years, you come up with a crazy idea, they're more likely to go along with it because you have that relationship going. Along with trying to go faster, it feels like these days we're trying harder. We're just working harder to try to get the thing done. And those are maybe the things that AI can help us with, the trying harder things. But maybe the things that AI is not very good at is being caring and being supportive of your team and making those social connections and understanding the details, right? It's great at summarizing. It's not great at picking out what the really important details are going to be that make or break your system. And so Candy Williams, again, a giant among content strategists, you know, asks, what if compassion is a currency, not cruelty? What if we're intentional in how we build our systems to make something welcoming, to make something for people, just like we try to be in our interactions at work, because we need to work together, right? So let's keep moving forward. Let's move into judgment and think about it from a human perspective. So we know, we've all seen the listicles, 7 reasons why, 5 things you should do, right? We know AI doesn't have great judgment, right? It summarizes, it finds the median. It's not going to get you the next new great idea. It'll get you the ideas that have already been talked about and written about, maybe with some extrapolation, right? We know it reduces sensitivity to language. There's a bit of a breakdown in tone of voice. There's meaning drift. I have a long list. You guys don't need to hear it. But we also know from a lot of great social science research that people don't always have great judgment either, right? And so we need to understand what AI does well and what we do well, and where the role is for expertise and for growth and for, you know, this apprenticeship model that to a large degree we have in design and information architecture. How do we grow as practitioners? And again, this comes back to the people thing we were just talking about, right? So Peter Morville in Ambient Findability, again, many years ago, has not aged well, but was a foundational work, talks about the people problem. He talks about how we're very susceptible to flattery, and I love Claude no matter what. And he talks about how, you know, there's so many studies. One of my favorite other facts is people aren't going to seek out information that will make their job harder, right? So that's a tricky thing to think about. Like, if we've got blinders on about things that might make a problem more complex, are we solving the right problem? Are we working on the right things, and are we having the right impact? Obviously, in design, we have this great toolkit of things that helps us do that better. But this is what I'm excited about. So Chris, and I'm sorry about the pronunciation, Nessel, has a book coming out with Rosenfeld. And he's written a book about agents. He's written many, many books. But his next book is about assistants. So again, he can't use assistive technology because that's a protected term. But this is what I'm excited about. I'm excited about AI not as the decision maker, not as the thing that's going to, make it not visible that decisions have been made, but as an assistant. I'm not thinking about Clippy. I'm thinking about something, that's worked out a lot more than Clippy ever had. But I want something that's going to do the boring tasks for me if I tell it what to do. And then I want to be making the decisions in the room with everybody else who needs to be making the decisions together. Very excited. Coming out this year. Hopefully some great stuff coming there. All right, so just a few more minutes here. Let's talk about technology and process. Because we all come into the room with great intentions, right? But then we've got the Jira board, then we've got the workflows, and then we're trying to fit into a system that's already been designed, right? And we're being asked to do it faster. And I don't know about you, but in my case, when I rush, it is so hard to be intentional. It's so hard to remember what the important bits are. I'm just really busy trying to get them all done, right? And so part of slowing down is when you're feeling rushed, realize, I'm feeling rushed. Is there anything here that needs to slow down, or do I just need to get it done? Do we understand the problem? Do we understand the solution? All right, great, let's get it done. But let's also remember that the process of figuring out the solution helps you keep understanding the problem better. And so if you skip over too much of that, you're really doing things at a very superficial level. And if you work in agencies like I do, you come back to what value am I delivering? If you're doing things at a superficial level, then why are they paying your agency hundreds of thousands of dollars to do the job when they could go to ChatGPT or Claude and do the same job themselves, right? So Pavel Samsonov, in his talk at Throughline, talks about how there's no such thing as no process. Non-design systems are always just reactive systems, right? There's a process, it just hasn't been designed. There's always the user, there's always the context, there's always the goal, but maybe people didn't get together in a room and decide and agree on what that goal was or what it meant for that to be the goal. So, there we go. So I don't know if you've ever been in a design review where somebody's like, oh, why did you name it that? This is what Amazon does. This is what Apple does. This is what Netflix calls it. That's happened to me, usually with people who aren't used to a design review. But again, sometimes that's what AI feels like. It'll go and see what the most common thing is that people call this, right? And I even like Google Trends better than AI. Like, I can figure out in the state of Virginia, are people more likely to call it a webinar or an online workshop or, a course or whatever it is, right? I know what people are searching for just with something as basic as Google Trends. It doesn't have to be an expensive research study, right? But for me, that's more meaningful than to say, hey, this person who's a 500-pound gorilla and doesn't have to look at their bottom line and hasn't had to in 20 years, they're doing the most successful thing. It's like, well, they're already successful. Of course, whatever they do will be successful. They're not going to lose clients over it. Doesn't mean that that's what we have to do, right? And again, easiest way to show up without intention is to copy somebody else's intentions, especially when it's not clear to you what they are. They're just somebody popular, right? So, this is the main point here. Stop being reactive. You need to know what you're trying to accomplish and get agreement within the decision group on what that is before you dive into the details. And really all that means is show up with intention. So when we don't have a good sense of what we want, we let our tools define our goals. Again, Pavel Samsonov, much, much smarter than I will ever be. But all of a sudden, everyone's making prototypes much faster than before. And that makes us think somebody's made design decisions. But maybe the prototype has just said what's popular. Or maybe the prototype knows what's successful, but there hasn't been a due level of care applied in those design decisions that are just being shown up in the mock-up or in the design. So maybe we're documenting something that hasn't actually been thought through. And we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of where those important decision points are for whatever we're building. And bringing back Erica Hall, just a reminder that design fundamentally is a mental state. Yes, you're going to write things down, you're going to document them, but engaging with uncertainty, making something intentionally better is what you're trying to do. You're trying to think through a problem. You're trying to come to a solution. And yes, you're going to document it, but that solution needs to be explicit through the documentation and not just invented by the documentation, right? So, I think we've just got a bunch of quotes at this point. So anyway, this is Kahneman, who obviously wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, which I couldn't really wrap up without coming to. And he talked about being more likely to learn things by finding surprises in your own behavior than by hearing surprising facts that other people have found. So that experience, that process of designing it, brings out new information, right? There's this whole slow design movement. You know, it's a philosophy that prioritizes things like thoughtfulness, sustainability, long-term value, right? Obviously, we don't have the time to do these things every day, but we find the opportunities for when they're worth it. You know, I have stories, but I'm just gonna keep moving. Again, we have to consider that full life cycle. We have to consider the full life of a product and how it might evolve over time. And again, I've already been talking about this a little bit. And Ini Abiodun talks about this much, much better, right? How do you stay human and sane in this AI gold rush? And it's about, you know, finding those opportunities, building up the capital. So all of a sudden you can say, hey, can we take the time to study this a bit more? Can we take the time to understand this a bit better before we move on? Because we think this is going to be important and we don't want to have to do it 4, 5 times. We want to understand it the first time, right? And so you figure out when it's the right thing to do, when you want to use up your political capital, and you build those relationships, right? And I think in this day and age, you find time to play with these things. It doesn't always have to be serious exploration, right? Remember to play. And I think that's just like the most fun you can have with your work, and it doesn't always need to be deadline driven. So how you build communities, how you build understanding and shared goals is through doing all of this, right? You move slower than the hype cycle. You question things that don't serve you, and you prioritize humans. In conclusion, when faced with a difficult question, we often answer an easier one instead, usually without noticing that we've switched them. So that's just something to remember, that even though we talk a lot about how AI isn't very dependable, we tend to trick ourselves too. So we want to show up with intention when we do design. We want to understand the fallacy of the data-driven organization. As Erica Hall would tell you, and this is one of my favorite lines ever, anyone who tells you that they make decisions on data and not stories is a lying liar. And I will take that one with me and keep it close to my heart. So design really is about relationships and having a point of view. Those things take time. You know, when I used to interview designers coming in, and sometimes people would come in at a fairly senior level, I would want to see that they had a point of view. I would want to see that they had something about the design zeitgeist that they particularly liked or particularly didn't like. And if somebody wasn't willing to take a stand, that made me nervous, right? I want people to have a point of view. I want them to do their work well as well. But you need to have enough of an understanding of what you're doing to have opinions about it and to be willing to share those. excuse me, you need to be able to say, this doesn't feel right. And these are the ways that you can do that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Do we have time? Is there any questions? Okay.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for the presentation. I'll just take one of the questions from the prompts we have around the room, so please feel free, anybody, to write on a sticky note. But one of the questions is, I heard that you work at an agency, so how, when presenting to stakeholders, how do you kind of get them to slow down for people who might have such a time crunch and these certain goals they want to achieve by, but letting them know, like, hey, we don't want to miss any errors, but I know a lot of times they necessarily don't want to hear that. They just want results, results, results. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of process to that, right? You don't dive into the details right away. You don't dive into the mock-ups right away. I'm super, super old school, so I'm about having project pillars. If you don't all get together at the start and say, these are the 3, 4, 5 things this project is trying to accomplish, and that's how we're going to measure it, then you're already in trouble because you're fighting over the details and you're fighting over who likes what better. So if you have project pillars, you can say, hey, but remember, we decided that bringing in this audience was our project pillar. We really need to aim this at that audience. When you get into a disagreement, when you get into the details, you can go back to that higher level conversation. And it takes having them first and taking the time to have them first. It takes reminding people at each meeting, because we're all busy people. We've forgotten what we talked about on Thursday, right? And just having, some people call it a guiding star, some people talk about lots of other ways, but really it's project pillars.
Thanks so much for the talk. I was reflecting on a book that I need to read called Make to Know, which was written by one of the former presidents of Art Center, Lauren Buckman. And I was thinking about your comment with having the stakeholders present. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about balancing the keeping folks and the stakeholders informed while allowing the creative process to be exploratory.
Sorry, that one's going to take a little thought. There's different activities at different times that pull in different levels of stakeholders, right? If you've got the president of a university, you get 15 minutes of their time throughout the project, right? And maybe they're getting email updates from somebody in their department. But I think I'm grasping at the wrong part of your question, but let me keep going. I think I love doing workshops. I love speaking back at community events. And I think especially in terms of information architecture, I've done a lot of sitemaps for a lot of universities. It is the most political thing you will ever encounter, right? You can't get to level 2 for a month. And in any case, I think you have to have people know that they're hearing you without taking up too much of their time. And so you need a lot of different mechanisms working together for different audiences. It's almost like a marketing plan for your stakeholders as you get. Did that answer any part of your question?
Yeah, I think I'm really asking more about balancing keeping stakeholders informed while also allowing space for creative discovery in the design process.
Yeah.
And kind of thinking about how do we ensure that those loops of interactions between the designer and the stakeholder are healthy while kind of venturing into a bit of an unknown of a project that comes out in the creative process.
And I think you'll find stakeholders love to be involved creatively, right? They love that workshop where they get to come up with ideas and contribute in early stages of design, right? Like, hey, this is a feature that could be important to us. These are some things we're picturing for that feature. Sure, you take that away, you rebuild it, you rethink it. But I think there's creative ways of engaging stakeholders, one. Two, you know, it's always about governance. You need a RACI. Is this person that you're listening to? Is this just a person that it's important that you're informing? Is this a decision maker or the person who's actually going to have to do the work after you leave, so they need to be happy, right? You have all these levels of people, and sure, you can be creative. We love being creative, but we need to bring them along in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, hi. So in the last couple of years, there's been a really big movement towards frictionless design. And it's a lot of stuff that you've been kind of talking about in terms of like slowing down kind of against that. One example I think of a lot recently is in Animal Crossing, where in order to do anything, it takes literal days, for like real life days, for you to like plant a tree or whatever. So
Is
where...
that the game where there's like cockroaches in my house on the island?
Yes,
Is
if
that-
you're, yeah,
okay.
sometimes.
all right, keep going.
Yeah, so where is friction, not frictionless design, but friction design, where is that important in terms of, in today's context, within understanding, designing for users' needs, literacy, and what was the last thing I wrote? Mental health.
All right, there's a lot there, and I'm not sure I'm quite capturing what you mean by frictionless design.
So like designing things to be where users are not,
easy.
yeah, not necessarily just easy, but that users don't necessarily have to think through things when they're using an interface.
Still a great book, so many years later. No, actually, this is Inmates Are Running the Asylum, not Don't Make Me Think. Sorry, I didn't get Steve Krug up here. We're doing cycles. So in terms of mental health, how is this valuable? Is that the question?
Let me try and see how I can consolidate this.
You're talking about how sometimes we create something, whether it's user interface, that we want to make so easy that people just breeze through it and don't think about it, because we're really trying to take those mechanics out of play. But in other situations, we want them to slow down, whether that's
Yeah.
long lines of text or whether that's user input that really forces you to wait and really think. And you're using friction, but you're using friction to create that conversation and create that kind of back and forth story.
Right, you're writing it in all caps because you want them to slow down and read it and not just see the shape of the word. Okay. I'm a big fan of making things explicit. And so even if there's an implicit way of doing it, having that explicit way, that's good for accessibility. It's good for different instances. You know, we get really, really into like confirmation messages. And I think you're right that slowing things down sometimes is better than just putting in loads and loads of confirmation messages that we stop reading and stop even looking at. It's just like, where's the okay? Where you can just keep going, please. Yeah, I'm really worried I'm not addressing your question.
No, I think you kind of answered it. And
Okay.
he also got to the same kind of idea.
Thank you so much.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you, thank you. And if you have any other questions or comments, obviously she'll be around. Alrighty, next up we have Wesley. Is Wesley around? What? Where's Wesley? Oh, there he is. Last talk. This is the big one. This is the one you've all been waiting for. All right, he's gonna plug in. Did anyone get bingo today? Did anyone get a full? No, I never heard anyone call out bingo, so I guess I didn't have it. That's good. It means you guys were like talking too much to just run around and gather names. That's good.
this good height? Yeah. Getting comfortable. All right, we ready? My name's Wesley. I'm one of 3 partners at Folder Studio. We're a LA-based design. We're an LA-based design studio working out of South Pasadena. Derek asked me to come talk to you guys about a few of our projects because the way we're encountering information is a bit more on the graphic and communication design end. Cool. So our studio is called Folder Studio, and we work with cultural institutions such as LACMA, Carnegie Museum of Art, Princeton Art Museum, Harvard GSD, on the presentation of their information and
Let's
archives.
see if one of these is better, because you got a lot of stuff to say. I want people to hear it.
Okay, is this better? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, you know, but you gotta hold it like this.
All right,
You guys
I'll
don't know enough
hold it.
about
I'll hold-
karaoke. You gotta sing more karaoke, and then you learn the mic control.
I
Come
think
on,
that,
stop it.
all right,
Tell 'em the stuff,
chair,
man.
chair plus handheld, we'll do it. All right, so this is kind of a quick sampling of our work over the years. It covers different mediums, books, exhibitions, identities, archives, websites. So today I'm going to show you guys a few projects that demonstrate how we as a design studio are encountering and negotiating information in our practice. Okay, the first project I want to share with you guys is called K-Town 92. This is a project, it's an interactive documentary directed by Grace Lee, produced by Yuri Chung. They came to us with this idea of doing an interactive documentary about the 92 uprising, riot, pushback. People are not sure what to call it still. So the tagline of the movie is, "Who gets to tell the story?"
Express that rage and frustration, but don't take it out by looting, by burning, and by shooting people. Los Angeles is on fire.
About 60 businesses are inside, all Korean-owned.
So the reason the documentary is titled K-Town 92 is because K-Town is where the violence first started happening and erupted in K-Town before spreading throughout LA. So the director came to us with 5 buckets of content, and the interviews came to us in long form. So we had to decide how we were going to navigate and negotiate between the clip versions of the newscasts and the archival footage. So we also just cut the long form interviews into clips so that we can tag them appropriately in the same way as we tag the other clips. So information architecture-wise, this is quite simple. It's just in 5 buckets and tied together with tags. The tags are on the right-hand side and are extremely opinionated. So what we did differently with this simple architecture is present it in an unconventional way.
Trailer, they took him off and then they started beating him. And then he was lying there for like a couple of minutes.
One sign from a protester, but you'll hear a police officer's view of this in a while. Listen carefully. Go in there and find
everybody. Many of them are just out there. They don't know what they're doing. And I focus on what
Growing up in Koreatown through the 90s was very interesting for me because I realized how much race played such a large role and how much race was projected onto my black body at such an early age.
Okay, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of the interaction design we did. We decided we were going to show up to 5 videos at the same time in a way to make this massive content more permeable for everybody and make it actually watchable linearly as a documentary. So the structure of the project is actually quite neutral, even though the tags are quite opinionated. And then the user's interaction, moving the mouse from clip to clip, depending on their personal interests and biases, becomes the editorial angle of the project. Okay. The next project I want to share with you guys is called Gallery 98. This is a collection of art ephemera from New York, ranging from 1960s up till today. And it's all collected by this one man, Mark, who's been collecting these ephemera pieces for over 50 years. And put his own website together using just loose tags. So the information came to us in loose tags. He's got a big collection. When we first started, it was around 6,700 items. It's around 8,700 items now, and he's just been doing this by himself. So the site and system is really simple to use for him, and you'll kind of see the power of that in a little bit. This is the web platform we designed for him. We give you guys some big buckets up here, some featured stuff, but pretty immediately you're getting into some visuals. And every item is exposed with tags, which allows you to just pop around this enormous archive really quickly and really naturally. So it really becomes interesting when you're in an individual item. All these little loose tags are actually powering the ability to group things together, surface unexpected stuff on the side, related stuff. You can just go around browsing visually, but the real interesting part of it is down here, where the tags live. So when organizing such a large archive, I think the natural instinct is to start categorizing stuff, putting them into buckets, making it really explicit. But in this situation, that would be plastering over some really like idiosyncratic information, and we would be losing all of Mark's hand in his own collection. And with such a big collection, there's so many ways to slice it. How would you make decisions on what you are going to categorize things into? So we decided we're gonna expose all of them. It's more, the way we looked at this, they were loose tags unorganized, right? So instead of doing an information architecture, I would consider what we did information archaeology. And we realized it wasn't the individual items that need to get categorized, it's actually the tag groups. And it's a lot of tags. The advantage to doing something like this is the audience is very specific, and with their own knowledge of what they're looking for, they can self-identify where to go. Am I moving kind of fast? No? Okay. All right, this next project is called A Section of Now. It is an exhibition that was put on by the Canadian Centre for Architecture in Montreal. And the Canadian Centre for Architecture is a research institution focused on architectural responses to open-ended inquiries. So their whole MO is we're not here to judge, we're here to present, we're not here to take a stance. So this particular exhibition is dealing with a number of topics. They have 6 galleries in the space, so each gallery is assigned to one specific topic. And the point of this show is to give an examination of, like a section under a microscope of the current time we're living in. So this show was in 2021, so there was a lot. We started working on it before COVID, and then the show opened after COVID, which brought a lot of these same themes up and became very pertinent. This is a promo video we made for them for a year's worth of programming running up to the show. And it kind of shows you the types of themes that we're dealing with here. And the stance of the program is very fuzzy, because at the time, you're working through a year-long's worth of inquiry. It's quite fuzzy, up to the show, which needs to bring all of that into focus. So the graphic approach for that is very sharp. And the central design element of the show is these 6 icons corresponding to the 6 rooms in the museum. And we have them everywhere. Outside, in their bookstore, on the walls, in the thresholds between all the galleries. And these doorways worked out really well, actually, because the themes of the show kind of overlap with each other. So these became not a way of labeling different galleries. It's sort of a guidepost to and in between each of the themes. So like an obvious move would be to do like really specific icons or like color-coded rooms. But in this case, we went for something more ambiguous. So these are the 6 themes that we were asked to deal with, which seems simple, but each one of these is full of information we have to contend with. So for example, the idea of family, we could think about it very simply, like, okay, nuclear family, mom, dad, whatever. But any depiction of a family is a claim about what family should be. So, these 6 things are actually looking more like this. So each icon holds the domain of knowledge that it's associated with, and it's a broad domain. So, see, family can become dating, new family styles, multi-generational living situations. Productivity might become tech work, optimization, digital addiction. So each icon needs to do a lot of work. Even the family icon, I think just on its own, you don't really know what that's supposed to be depicting, but you kind of get that it's like a person, you kind of get that it's a house. It gives you the room to interpret it into the multiple pieces of domain. But you have the domain expansion, but it's actually representative of all this, a 300-page book. So the icons in one gesture per theme establishes the bound of the domain without claiming it. Okay, this project is a book. It's a book for acclaimed gallerist Jeffrey Deitch and his seminal show Posthuman. So the show Posthuman was originally put on in 1992, and it really influenced how people think about their bodies, technology, identity. It was really ahead of its time. And to bring it up to a modernized version of it, Jeffrey put on another show in 2024, tackling the same themes, bringing in some of the artwork from the 92 show, and then bolstering it with new art. So one of the big challenges for the catalog was to kind of combine these two eras. The 1992 catalog had this great visual essay by Dan Friedman that we wanted to incorporate into the new catalog, but that presents a very specific set of challenges, information challenges. How do you insert something that has its own identity, its own background, into a vehicle that is supposed to make a case for the new show? So this is a side-by-side of the gallery installs from 92 and 2024. So you can really feel the gap, but also the connection. It's a 32-year gap. So one of the ways we approached this was making the flow of the book very specific. There's 4 main sections. It's the 1992 visual essay, which we're reproducing for the most part. The installations from the 1992 show, the artist plates for 2024, and the installation views for 2024. So these are like representative spreads for those. On the left is material from 1992, and on the right is material from 2024. So what we did to kind of emphasize this split was we did a paper change in the middle of the book, but you'll notice that the installation views for 1992 are already adopting the design system for 2024. So we have a bit of a blending on top of the hard break in the middle. So we've kind of established that there's a break in the two shows, So how do we bring that back to one unified design system? And the way we did that was through typography. So on the left is a spread from, or a page from 1992, and the updated version on the right. And typeface selection was extremely important for this because we needed to maintain the quality of the 1992 material while bringing it into the modern era. So the two typefaces that were used in 92 are DIN and Franklin Gothic. And what we transitioned to is a modernized DIN called T-Star and a modernized Franklin Gothic called Trivia Gothic. So this is what we did with the visual essay. We retypeset the visual essay. We could have just left it as scans and facsimile, but it was important for us to bridge the two eras through typography. So I would say this is a remaster than a reproduction. Cool, so this is kind of the overall flow of the whole book. You can kind of see there's density differences from 92 and 2024, but it should all feel like it's living under the same logic. These are spreads from the new book comparing 1992 and 2024 as seen together. And the information point I want to make about this book is through material choices and through design choices, we're able to hold two competing, actually extremely competing ideas and pieces of information under the same object. So it's the split between the two eras, but the continuation of the two eras. That's my talk, guys.
Great. Any questions?
I like have 1,000 questions, but
Yeah.
I'll try to contain it to one.
No, I'm happy.
So the example that you showed for, the example that you showed for the art collection, so
Gallery 98?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, how did you know which ones, like for photo-wise to show, and then the like all the information on the bottom, like how did you determine that? And to follow up on that question, it's like, did you test it? Because it kind of felt like an Amazon page, just like a bunch of crap all at once. And if you're in the know, you know how to navigate. If you don't, it's overwhelming. So was there any testing or anything? Or are you just like, this is the demographic and this is what the client said?
Yeah, there's a bit of self-selection potentially, but I would argue that actually exposing all that stuff, probably in the same way Amazon is thinking, it's actually making the huge material library more permeable, because you get tons of holes that you can tunnel through, tons of pathways. I think it really has to do with that information sent notion that Justine just talked about.
All right. Well, you guys should definitely go check out the whole folder site. Anytime I want to talk about typography to anyone, I just take them there and I could talk to them for like 10 hours because there's so much amazing typography there. But when you're thinking about this, I mean, do you even think about information architecture, or are you just doing what you do? How much are you actually explicitly thinking about this or talking about it with the clients in the way that you're kind of selling this to them?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I wouldn't say I need to sell them on information architecture. Usually there's a goal, and you need to have information architecture to achieve the task. And there's a lot of stuff you can communicate through information architecture. There's a lot of opinions you can inject into the shape of the information, But what we need is good information so that we're able to manipulate it on the front end.
Thank you. I'm curious about your team, or like how does that all that work get done? Like I saw that page that had all the images, and yeah, I'm curious like what the process and the flow is to create these awesome things.
Yeah, no problem. There's 3 of us, and we've been doing this since 2013. So it's built up over time. It's me, my partners Takumi and John. John is here today. Was there a second part of your question?
I guess like what is how do you go about doing either of the projects? They were all sort of versatile and different. So I don't know if you could just share what the process is like.
Oh, process.
Design process, yeah.
Design process, yes. Okay, there's so many layers to this. Each of us kind of has, like, we're all doing graphic design, but each of us kind of has an emphasis. So I'm more on the content and information strategy side. Takumi is more focused on the visual graphic design end, and then John is really focused on implementation and architecture. So between the 3 of us, we have like a lot of opinions, of course, but you know, there's kind of going back to the whole like we need good data in order to communicate our point. We have to understand the data at an intimate level, and knowing what to keep and what not to keep, and where the kind of insight is in the data. So the whole Gallery 98 thing is really about like the archaeology. You're discovering something that's already there, instead of like tearing it down and building a condo or something. And then on top of that, we have the intangibles, which the graphic design really starts to speak to. That's also information in a different way. So the graphic design helps the viewer kind of intuit some intangible element about the project or about the content. So like Gallery 98, right? That is really heavily using Futura, which was very prominent across all the ephemera that he had collected over the time.
Thanks for the presentation, by the way. It was pretty cool how you showed like information architecture can be like an art form as well. For the project where it was, I don't remember the name, but it was like a museum, and you had like different iconography that was kind of amorphous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like it was interesting how you created iconography based off of like these, information categories. And you kind of said that it was like ambiguous enough, but also like concrete enough that people can kind of like guess that it might mean one of these things. But I'm sure you've like prototyped like different versions of each icon.
100%.
Did you like try testing it out with like how people would react to it, or do you just kind of like let it let it off into the wilds?
I think from the graphic design, communication design end, we have a pretty specific viewpoint we're trying to convey. I'm pretty unworried about user testing because often the thing that you're testing with users is something that you know is not working. So I don't see a point in doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry, that was a little harsh. I'm not saying I don't see a point at all in doing it.
That was amazing. For the K-Town 92 project, could you explain a little bit more why 5 videos were chosen to show at the same time rather than like 4 or 6?
Actually, it varies as you watch. So sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3. It's a way to keep the user engaged while watching so many clips. And when we pushed it out, there was like a opening event, and people were saying they were spending like 2-3 hours just watching the clips play nonstop. Yeah. if they had the budget for it, it would be there. Yeah, I really think that's an excellent takeaway afterwards, because it'll really map your personal biases of how you're watching the movie. Yeah.
Two questions. My first question was follow up to the previous question. How were the clips grouped together? Is it based on relevance to each other, or is there like a narrative or a story that you're trying to tell by piecing the certain clips together?
Great question. So what's funny is those buckets don't really matter. It's all tied together with the tags, and whatever you're paying the most attention to are the tags that we're going to use to serve up the next batch of videos. So it's a really simple system, really. Yeah.
I love that. That's so cool. It's kind of like choose your own adventure kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
My second question was, I'm sure it varies across projects, but from like conception and when people contract you for projects and your partners, how long does it take from that initial kickoff until like the product is like done with and shown and all that?
Extremely client dependent.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we're engaging on like a really large scale project, that's where you have to go talk to either stakeholders or have a contact that really understands the stakes. And then you really have to, again, what Justina was talking about, you got to get the question you're trying to solve right first on those. For smaller stuff, it's easier for us to kind of like hold it in our heads. So something like K-Town, they came with the clips, and I was like, oh, I know, I've seen online documentaries. They're extremely disruptive. Every time you watch something pops up. We should get rid of that. So that the idea came pretty quick, and then when you have a cultural client, let's say, or like a director, for example, they're open to ideas. Luckily, she wasn't like, no, this is not how I want the movie directed. You're messing up my whole shtick. So she was very open to that, and we've been lucky to work with clients who are understand what we're trying to do.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry, I had one more question. Yeah, go for it. What was the most, out of the projects you showed, what was the most stressful timeline that you had? Or was there one?
Oh, out of the 4, probably K-Town 92. Yeah. I do have to add to that, is that was a technology thing that made it really stressful, because it's probably pretty trivial to get that up and running now, but at the time, serving up 5 videos at the same time was pretty rough. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one last question. Great work. I love your work with your second project, the website.
Yeah.
What was it again?
Gallery 98.
Gallery 98.
Yeah.
So first question is about the technicalities of the backend of this website. You guys using a kind of a CMS, and the client is feeding that CMS, or you have someone?
It came as a WordPress, and since he is a solo guy, we kept it on WordPress. Okay.
Yeah, great work. And the second one is about your client. I don't know if you can share some of your experience, or how do you find this type of clients, because they're very unique projects.
It's mostly word of mouth. We try to put out work that represents us well and communicates kind of what our ethos is. And our experience is that people self-select and gravitate towards our work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, Wesley. All right, guys, we did it. Oopsie. All right, well, can we just get a round of applause for all the speakers today? And also for all the organizers and volunteers that volunteered their time and efforts and sweat. And yeah, so thanks a lot. This here is the QR if you want to visit. That's the official World IA Day. You can see there's a feedback survey, discounts, there's a raffle going on, so definitely check that out. I think that's on your paper thing too, so. Yeah, and it is a volunteer nonprofit organization, so if you are into it and you want to be a part of it, there's plenty of opportunity. You can talk to one of us if you want to be involved for next year, or there's all sorts of stuff on their website. And yeah, there's a Discord, like I said in the beginning. It's kind of been stagnant over there, so if anyone wants to get the conversation going, yeah, they have a whole thing going on, and you can, I think, just kind of set up your own talks and community. So check it out. And then, yeah, and we are going to have a sort of informal after event over at Hog Heaven. You guys are obviously welcome to just go over there, keep the conversations going, and we're going to clean up here and be over there probably around 6. So that's it. Appreciate it. You're free to go. And again, if you want to check out all this cool stuff, go upstairs, check out the garden, go take a picture with Kenny Scharf mural for your Instagram, look all artsy. And any of the feedback you want to leave out on the tables, we definitely appreciate